Good evening at 6 o'clock at the Common Council, Tuesday, July 9th, 2024. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, public hearing, 2024 special assessment, East 14th Street reconstruction. Public hearing open. Any discussion? Any discussion? A third time, any discussion on the East 14th Street reconstruction? Public hearing is closed. Item D, public hearing, 2024 special assessment, asphalt paving program. Public hearing open. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the asphalt paving program? A third time, any discussion? Seeing none, public hearing closed. Item E, public hearing, 2024 special assessment, sanitary sewer projects. Public hearing open. Any discussion? Any discussion? A third time? Seeing no discussion, public hearing closed. Thank you. Item number F, identify one more time. Identify possible conflicts of interest. Too many words in one, right? Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, I've got conflict of interest in the second closed session item.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Seeing none, move on to item G, public comment period correspondence. At this time, I'll recognize those members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. First, we have Katie Stieber. You come to the lectern and state your name and address, and you get 5 minutes.
Okay, my name is Katie Stieber. My address is 204272 County Road E in Marshfield. And okay, so I'm Katie Stieber, and I'm here to talk on the behalf of Woodland Play Cafe and as the future owner of Blodgett House. So Woodland Play Cafe, some of you already know, is going to be an indoor play space for children, but with Blodgett House as the intended space that will be located, we'll be able to grow that idea far beyond what we had imagined. We have talked to countless businesses, countless people in our community, and countless parents, and we heard all of you. With Blodgett House, we can create an entire community that will support caregivers of young children. We will have a play space for the children on the main level still, but with the tenant spaces available at Blodgett House, we will also have tenants that offer services from doula services, tutoring services for children, children's photography, as well as luxury services that parents, a lot of times we neglect or miss out on, like lash technicians, maybe a nail technician service, and massage therapists. So these are things that we often miss out on or neglect that we can now make more available to support the parents of our community. This community that we'll be creating will also by nature automatically be great for economic development in a few different ways. The first way is keeping families in town, and which keeps their money being spent right here in Marshfield. The second way is employee recruitment and retention. So having something like this available in our community will help us to be able to draw people to work at our clinic and other larger businesses. And the third one would be supporting the small businesses that are venturing out on their own and into our tenant spaces, like that children's photographer who's currently working for a bigger corporate company that would be able to branch out on her own. So why am I here? Basically, I wanted to state it for myself that as the future owner of the Blodgett House, I am in support of a bathroom rental option for the Plaza instead of building on the Plaza. I am open to the discussion about logistics and specifics, and at the end of the day, I'm confident that we could find a win-win between the Marshfield community and our new little community that will be located right inside Blodgett House. So I'm just here today to encourage all of you to explore this option that can be a temporary option before committing to a permanent building. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Next, Aaron Howard.
Hello, my name is Erin Howard, 402 West Park Street. I am as passionate as I am about talking about bathrooms. I'm not going to talk about them today. I love economic development. And it's something I just want everyone to kind of think of the bigger picture, just for our community in Marshfield. When Chris and I moved here about 15 years ago, I remember we owned one property downtown. And I remember we weren't really thinking about, continuing to develop to what we have been doing. And it just kind of happened by accident, to be honest. And I remember there were times where, Chris and I would have an idea and people would say, why downtown? It's kind of vacant. And I was kind of perplexed by that because we like to travel and we've been to a lot of communities where the downtown is where people thrive. And so long story short, getting to where we are today, fast forward, it's pretty cool when you think about how awesome the downtown is because now people are running out of options of where to go for spaces. And I don't want to just talk about the downtown. I want to talk about the community of Marshfield because I would definitely say this is a city of opportunity. We're in the center of the state. And I know sometimes people focus that we have no water, but we have incredible resources that I feel like there's not a lot of people understand truly what we have unless they're in the thick of it. And I'm talking about the organizations that help the city of Marshfield. The SCORE program through Mackey itself, Main Street, the realtors, they're the ones that literally talk to people and they're, trying to help them see what they have here too. The big employers, Nelson Jameson, Prevention Genetics, the clinic, I've sat on a couple boards in the past, whether it's through the Historic Preservation Commission. And that, I just want to tell you one quick story about that because I know I'm going to run out of time here. And I'm all over the place and I apologize. But last year we had, for the Historic Preservation Commission, there was a group of people from all over the state that came for their annual conference. And it was pretty incredible because we toured everywhere in Marshfield, not just the downtown, but everywhere, not just historic properties. And there were so many amazing responses, like, wow, here in Marshfield, I had no idea, where I actually had couples tell me that we already have a hotel for one night, but we're going to stay for another night. And that was a really cool thing to hear. And I feel like sometimes it takes outsiders looking in to show us what we have. And it's the same for you as well. When you go outside of the area, you notice all the amazing things. And so I guess where I'm going with this and how it ties into why I'm bringing this up is Katie, you just heard from her vision and what she wants to do. And I can attest to what she said about economic development and employee recruitment and retention. One of the biggest things I've heard from many employers is it's not so much trying to convince them to work for that company, it's trying to show them why they want to move to the area. Because at the end of the day, it's the spouse, it's the kids, the family that they are trying to decide why they would want to live here. And if we can offer something in the community that is year-round, where parents can go with their laptops and collaborate and talk to other parents and have their kids hang out, I mean, that's an amazing thing. And when you look at all the businesses that are here, all the small businesses, that's how we support them. And that's how we support the employers that are trying to recruit people to hopefully bump up the 19,000 to maybe 30,000 people living here. So I just want everyone to look at the long-term vision, the long-term big picture of economic development and how decisions like this really can make a bigger impact than just one specific business that might choose to come here. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Next, Chris Howard.
Hi there, Chris Howard, 402 West Park Street. I did not bring a speech, 5-minute speech about bathrooms today, so I feel a little bit lost up here, but I'll try to wing it. I just wanted to tell you that I love this town. We moved here 14 years ago, and we're lifers. We're gonna be here forever, and I hope our kids don't move and our grandkids. I mean, that's a ways off, but we're lifers. We love this town. And when we make decisions as city staff, as the council, let's think about not just ourselves, but let's think about that next generation and the next generation. if there's a wheel squeaking right now this year, let's not throw some grease on it and move on. Let's think about how does that fit into the larger picture of our vision for this town. And it's going to take all of us, and we're not going to agree on everything. There's going to be ideas from the council, from city staff, from citizens, and we're going to fight like families fight. But at the end of the day, if we can work together, if we can forgive each other, if we can come together and see the bigger picture and find that greater good, I think we'll all be better off. Let's just keep the long term in mind. And sometimes those short term fixes make things more complicated down the road. So I just want to look forward as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else want to make citizen comment? Any other citizen comment? Any other citizen comment? Thank you. Item H, approval of minutes, June 20. Brian?
My apologies for bringing this up after the public comment period. I do have a conflict of interest with item T on the agenda tonight. So I just wanted to let everybody know that.
Okay,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Thank you. And never worry. Back to item H, approval of minutes, June 25th, 2024 regular meeting and June 27th, 2024 CIP meeting. We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Ms. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Staff updates. Tom Turchi.
Okay, as you're aware, we awarded the Adler Road Trail project here a little while back. And this afternoon, I received an email from the DOT saying that my application for reallocation of funding may be coming through shortly, and there will be a revised state municipal agreement that will come with that will probably provide additional funding for that project. So and they want a quick turnaround, so I'm basically letting you know that the mayor, council president, or myself may sign that just to keep moving this project forward. And it'll actually the only difference would be is that it give us more funding towards that total completion of that project. Okay.
Great. Thank you for that great information, Tom. Item J, mayor's comments. Nothing this evening. Council comments. Seeing none. City administrator's update.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have two items tonight. It was brought up under items for future agendas at the last meeting, the idea that when people are participating remotely via Zoom, they really can't see the faces of the people that are talking. They just see blank portions of the room, maybe the podium or different parts of the council or the whole room, but they can't necessarily visualize who's speaking. Well, our technology staff and our communication staff got together and did a wonderful job, and they addressed it. I understand that this was used to make the adjustment at the Board of Public Works meeting earlier this month, and it's being used now. So I just want to thank the great staff that we have and that improvement. The other thing is just a special meeting reminder. We have a special meeting coming up on Tuesday, July 23rd, before the next regular meeting. It'll be at 5 o'clock here in the council chambers. The regular meeting will still be at 6. The purpose of that special meeting is to hear a presentation from ADCI on the Buffalo building being converted to a police station for the relocation. Presentation will last about 40 minutes. That'll leave 15 to 20 minutes for council questions. We'll take a short break and then have the regular meeting after that. So again, mark your calendars for 5 o'clock not next Tuesday, 5 o'clock on Tuesday, July 23rd, for that discussion on the possible relocation of our police department. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Item M, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Seeing none. Item N, consent agenda. Motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Varsho. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. And we can strike O because we have no action. Remove it on consent agenda. Item P, 2024 borrowing sale date recap, presented by Dave Ferris Ellers. And Dave, you have the floor. Good evening.
Very good. Thank you for letting me present the results of today's sale. And Jennifer, you had told me that I had the ability to share my screen, and I don't feel like it's coming up. Oh, wait, there we go. There we go. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. I'll blow it up a little bit. So today at 10 o'clock, we took bids on the city's 2024 A general obligation promissory notes. We had some good participation. We had 4 bidders. The minimum we like to have is 3, so we got 4, but we actually got some pretty good rates. And having a sale a couple weeks ago with a AA2 rated entity and us being, and the city being really close to those rates being a AA3 rating, I felt like the results were pretty positive. We are financing your 2024 capital improvement plan, which includes some various projects and TID 13 projects. As I said, the city was affirmed a AA3 by Moody's Investors Service. They did provide some information, and it is included in the packet if you want to take a look at that after the meeting, of some things that basically they are looking at to help us get potentially to that next level of a AA2. But the things that are important is there's some things obviously that are out of your control. For example, things like resident income levels and full value per capita. That's not something you can do anything about, but Moody's was impressed with the fact that you've had some decent growth. They also are looking at, certain things with long-term liabilities. And so there's some things that are actually coming together as far as positives, as the advances that we had, basically the loans from the general fund to fund some of the TIFs are almost paid off. So there's a lot of positives. And I think from our messaging from the analyst the other day, we were able to gain that, we may be a couple years off, but we need to keep chugging in the same direction with where we have our financial benchmarks and we have a chance to move up. Like I said, there was 4 bidders. Your low bidder was Baird out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Actually on pages 4 and 5 are the name of the bidders. You can see on the first page that Baird actually had quite a few other participants with that. That's called the syndicate, but the rate was a 3.81%. The high bid was from TD Securities, who actually has won quite a few bids lately at 3.88. So you can tell the bids were very, very close together when it came to this. As far as the amount today, with how the sale came out, we were able to downsize the issue from the $9,050,000 that you saw in the agenda to $8,925,000. So when the resolution is passed tonight, I'm hoping that you received an updated resolution, but the number that should be approved tonight is $8,925,000. As far as the there was a term bond on this, so the city will have bond trust services as a paying agent, and what a term bond means is, and you can see it kind of on the next page is oh, that didn't work very well. Clicking things and it's going nuts on me. There's number ones next to 2042 and 2043. The underwriter put those together as one bond for investors because it made a good size bond for somebody that was looking for a larger investment than what we had for our payments that year. And so that's what's called the term bond, where the underwriter will lump these together and sell them as one bond. But for our purposes, we still make our payments. But in that 2042 payment, that's called an early call. And so out in 2042, whoever your finance director is at that point, maybe it's still Jennifer, there's something that has to be done that year. And so bond trust services, being a paying agent, basically comes to the rescue in that case and makes that notification. So when there's turnover, you don't have to worry about those kind of things haunting you. As far as the call date, I think Todd, when he was presenting to you, said that the call date on this will be March 1st of 2034, meaning that, you know, if rates are better at that point, you'll have a chance to refund them. Or if something were to happen where the TIF 13 ends up being really, really successful and you have extra cash and you can make a payment and downsize the issue, that would be our opportunity starting in 34 and any date after that. As I said, we're able to downsize from $9,050,000 down to $8,925,000. And on July 25th is the date that the city will receive the money to actually pay for its projects and equipment that it has in its CIP. Tonight, like I said, we'll ask you to award the sale of the $8,925,000. And I'll just quickly go through a couple of the financial schedules that you saw at the pre-sale report when Todd was there. We have a comparison of the preliminary that you saw before and the final, and really the project costs stay the same. The underwriter does throw some premium at this issue, and what that does is it takes basically the rates that you see here, these 5%ers. It basically takes what the yield was and makes it look like the coupon is worth 5%. As an example, if you were an investor and you went and bought one of these bonds in the market, you would pay more than the face amount, which is called a premium. And so over time, the way that accounting works, which I won't get into that, basically in the end, you would make 3.5% off that one bond. So that's kind of a trick that they do to make the coupons look good. It's something that gives you cash in your hands. That's what that premium is about. So that premium goes first to pay off the underwriter's discount, which is this $115,000, and the rest goes into the debt service fund to pay basically your first years of interest and a little bit more in TID 13, and you'll be able to see that later. One thing that Todd showed you at the pre-sale was how the impact of the 5-year CIP plan would happen. I basically adjusted the repayment so that we kept that structure where we're going up about $50,000 a year. And just to clarify from the pre-sale meeting, this does not include the police building. And I know that came up that night, but this is the without the police building version of the CIP for the next 5 years. There's a repayment schedule in here. It shows you how the premium that we received will help us pay off some of the principal and interest. There's a debt capacity analysis for the 5-year CIP, and we're floating along around mid-40s. And I believe your policy is, I think it's 65%, if I'm not mistaken. And I wish I had that on the schedule. Oh, it is, okay. So you're well below that policy. And then the other thing I included in here is the TID 13 cash flow. The good rates actually helped us cut about $120,000 off of the expenditure or the total expenditures. So out in 2039, the closure date that we're projecting, you know, obviously with a crystal ball, is 2039, but the pre-sale report showed that about $120,000 less in cumulative. So it did benefit the TIF with the good rates today. Otherwise, in here is the rating report that you can take a look at that kind of talks about where you're at. There's a scorecard in here that shows, you know, where they're scoring you out at, which the scorecard comes out the same as the rating. And then the other thing that's in here at the end is just a interest rate graph that kind of shows you that we've been kind of floating around for the last 3 months or so about the same market. I think when we came to talk to you in June, things were kind of popping up, and because they didn't continue to go up, we were able to take advantage of that. And really, you know, the end result is we saved about $600,000 of principal and interest over the life of this bond compared to what we showed you in June. So that's a quick update on how the sale went. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the council members? Alderman Worman.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to ask, you mentioned the proposed debt does not include the proposed police building that we were reviewing the other day. And the one comment that stood out to me in your presentation is that you said, you know, we're doing well, we need to stay the course. So what would the potential financial impact be of adding in that police station borrowing if we were to pursue that?
Well, you know, obviously when we do a building that's the size of what we're talking about popping in here, it does increase our leverage. And so, you know, the one thing that is also in the credit report is that there's certain upper levels that they want you to stay away from. And I believe that we are still in a pretty good area that when we add in the police building, that will not interrupt what we have currently. It might give us a little longer period of time to get the liability benchmarks back down a little bit. But, you know, I think as long as we continue to see growth and try to avoid having advances as much as possible, I think that they'll, you know, if you have that growth, they'll look past that larger project, and maybe that'll come to fruition and get you an upgrade at that point. But it does have that negative impact as far as affecting your leverage, your debt ratios, and we'll see. You know, if you grow, it could be that it washes out some. So we'll have to take a look. But you know, they understand that project was out there. But I think it's kind of one of those things that we just got to keep plugging along, and as long as we keep going in a positive way, we'll be in good shape.
So is there any major risk that you see then? And like, if there is risk, like hypothetically, this could affect our credit rating in the next year or anything like that. Could you talk a little bit about what the potential downsides are? Like what would we be facing if something like that were to happen, and how likely that is?
Can you state the beginning of that one again? I missed something there.
Yeah, no worries at all. I was just saying, can you talk a little bit about, you know, what do you see any major risk? And if so, if we were to add something like that in, and if so, would that potentially affect our credit rating that you can foresee? And if it did, what would be the potential cons of that?
I don't see the police building having that big of an impact on your current rating. You know, like I said, I mean, one of the things for going up, they want your liabilities to come down a little bit. So I don't see that we have any risk as far as going down for a rating. You're pretty stable. In fact, I think staff will tell you that the analyst believes that your rating is very stable. I don't think there's any negative impact to that, because you know, one thing that we do with our, you know, with the city and Ellers collaborating is we come up with a financial plan that basically shows that we're looking forward and we're trying to take care of things and fit things in without as big of an impact. So I don't see that you're anywhere close to having any kind of a downgrade. You'd have to have some pretty awful things happen for that to happen, I think.
Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we were to borrow, if the CDA was to borrow for us, would that help at all with the rating?
Well, the CDA bonds would get rated separately. You know, I guess the impact would be whether the city had some you know, whether those bonds were something that affected the city's health. So, you know, the only thing that it may help you do is not use your debt capacity as much. But I think as an overall entity, the rating agency is going to look at you as a whole, and that's still an obligation of the city. So I don't know that helps us other than the usage of the debt capacity.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
In the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have ahead of myself. We need a motion. Okay. Request to approve resolution number 2024-21 awarding the sale of 8925 General Obligation Promissory Note Series 2024A presented by Jennifer Solinsky, Finance Director, and that would mean $8,225,000.
Good evening.
That's all right. No worries. Thank you, Jennifer.
Of course. So this resolution actually awards the sale that occurred today of the notes as Dave presented in his post-sale report. So with that, if you have any questions about the resolution itself, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, I would ask for your approval of resolution 2024-31.
We have a motion by Alderman Spiro, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Stauber.
is just a formality. Is the number of the motion 31 or 21 because it has changed?
Okay, so Resolution 2024-21 was the resolution you passed for the ability to sell the bonds back in June. So we had a little mix-up in the packet, so I apologize for that. But the next number in sequence would be the 31.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. I think kind of along the same lines, did we vote on the authorization to execute the closing documents yet or no?
I'm sorry, I missed your last piece of your question.
No, that's fine. In item P, it says, after Mr. Ferris presented, which sounds like he just did, the recommended action is to authorize execution of closing documents. Did we skip over that, or is that kind of rolled into this resolution as well?
So we should have actually, I'm not sure. Dave, can you answer that question?
Those items are all a part of the resolution.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was going to say that the execution doesn't have anything to do with my presentation. The closing documents will actually get mailed to the city after you approve the sale, and then the staff gets the joy of signing all the documents. So
Dave's presentation summarized what will appear in those documents.
Any other questions, comments? And thank you for that, Andrew. And thank you, Dave, also for clarifying that. Please vote.
no problem.
Thank you.
Are you a yes? No one else? Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Weigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you, Dave, for the presentation and the great news.
Thank you.
Item R, second reading of ordinance number 1514, annexing the property of 8348 Heritage Drive to the city of Marshfield and establishing LI Light Industrial as its zoning clarification, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I won't walk through it in as much depth as I did 2 weeks ago, but this is a request for annexation from Interstate Marshfield LLC for a parcel of roughly 10 acres. It's currently located in the town of Marshfield, and it was brought into the city of Marshfield with this approval of this ordinance. It's located about 750 feet to the east of Quick Trip. It buffers on Heritage Drive as well. That is the south property line of the parcel. The services, sewer and water are all located adjacent to the property. It'd be easy to connect. I think at the last meeting I went through in depth the fact that the various infrastructure and service needs are available. They're properly in place with respect to making this annexation work. The applicant has requested LI Light Industrial. That would seem to fit with what that classification is about. Again, that's for the type of industrial projects that don't produce a lot of noise, dust, and those kind of things that are disruptive to the surrounding neighbors. So without any other comments I think I need to make at this point, unless there's questions, staff would recommend approval of ordinance number 1514, approving the annexation of this parcel and establishing light industrial as the zoning classification.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Spiros. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Doesn't show up here.
Yes, sir. I don't see anything, but that's, yeah. Would you put your vacuum cleaner on? I mean, sorry. Would you put your microphone on? Vacuum cleaner. Oh, where did that come from?
Where did that come from?
Yeah, basically, it would be very helpful for us over here in the cheap seats with can't see the board. If you would give the results of the call at the end of a vote, I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes.
Thank you.
Item S, first reading of ordinance 1516, amending Marshfield Municipal Code, section 14-36, Marshfield Utilities Commission, presented by Nicholas Cum, General Manager of Marshfield Utilities.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight is the first reading of ordinance number 1516, which includes revisions to section 14-36 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The proposed changes focus on several key areas. First, providing clarity in the language, ensuring that the compensation for commission members align with state statutes, and updating values to account for inflation, rising project costs, and level consistence with similar size utilities. The version in your packet tonight is slightly different than what we reviewed during the last Common Council meeting. These changes were based on the feedback that I received both during and after that meeting. So here's a summary of the changes. Sections 3 and 7, the wording related to reports has been modified or removed. As we discussed last time, the existing language was unclear about what reports entailed. And we also talked about how commission meetings are now taped or videotaped. Meeting minutes are provided just as they are for all the other boards, commissions, and committees in the community. And additionally, with the makeup change in the commission, we have commission members that also serve on this body. So that provides an additional communication channel. Section 4, this section clarifies that commissioners who serve on the Common Council are not entitled to annual compensation from the utility. This is in accordance with the state statutes. The new language makes this clear and then sets the annual compensation in the code at an amount of $600 annually. This is an increase from the current $400 annually for the remaining commissioners, excuse me. And then finally, section 5, this section sets the expenditure level at which council approval is needed for utility projects. Project costs continue to increase, and adjusting for inflation, a loan from 1934 would set the amount at nearly $600,000. As you remember, last time we started at the $5 million, which is comparable with other utilities. Based on the feedback from the last meeting, I reduced the value to $2.5 million. And then additionally, there was a sentence that was added to prevent intentional division of projects in order to bypass the council approval process. And I should note that any changes here they don't change the fact that any project that requires bonding will still come back to this body for approval. And as always, we must comply with any local, state, and federal permits and regulations. We're not requesting any action this evening, as this is the first reading, but I would welcome any feedback or comments that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions, comments for Nicholas? Seeing none, thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Item T, request to approve budget resolution number 10-2024, increasing adopted 2024 budget for the Economic Development Fund grants donations to other organizations by up to $100,000 for specified purpose of a contribution to the Columbus Catholic Fieldhouse project, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, at our last meeting on Tuesday, June 25th, the council did review and discuss a recommendation from the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee. There was a referral that came from the Economic Development Board from earlier in the month for a $100,000 contribution toward the Columbus Catholic Fieldhouse project. As part of my presentation that night, I did note that some items had not yet been submitted by Columbus Catholic. That was my fault. I had not actually made the full request. I did follow up with Mr. Eaton, and I do really thank you for your response. He did respond with a letter, and that's in your packet along with a couple of other documents that he submitted on behalf of the Columbus Catholic. So those are in your packet for your review. I'm not going to go through all the comments I made in my memo. I did include the memo again in the packet, but I think I went through those at length. So if you have any questions on any of that, as far as whether or not it meets policy 4.450 and to what degree, I'm here to take those questions. But otherwise, I would turn it over for conversation. And the recommendation, the discretion of the council, again, it's a budget resolution that's before you, if in fact you wish to consider approval.
We have a motion by Alderman Spiros, second by Alderman O'Reilly. Alderman Spiros?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been a lot of talk about this and whether it meets our policy, and I think that's a moot point now. I mean, clearly this is okay to do from everything we've been shown. Columbus Catholic has presented that information to us, and they've worked really hard. I think that this project has a good return on investment. It's been said a million times, we don't have water here. You know, we need to be the hub for something else. And I look at it this way, we have, you know, we have all the pickleball courts going in with the idea that those are going to create tournaments and heads in beds and things like that. And I thought about this for a long time, and I thought, you know, this is sort of the same thing. Maybe this is what we become. Maybe we become the tournament capital of this part of Wisconsin. So I think the return on investment is there, but as I had said in one other meeting, what we invest in our kids is invaluable, and I don't think that can even be measured. So I will be supporting that.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please, oops, okay, right at the button there, you two. Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. I'm just going to refer to the public purpose doctrine that HAP gave us. And thank you, HAP, for investigating case law and for looking at would this sort of donation stand up in court, or what we would need to do to have it stand up in court. And basically what I'm reading that HAP gave us was that we would need to very clearly have a record to show that there's a direct benefit to the city. And I'm going to read what you said. For an appropriation to be for a public purpose, the benefit to the public must be direct and not merely indirect or remote. And so when I think of a direct benefit to the city, it would be actually like the nonprofit pickleball group, because they were raising money that would then be directly invested in a public park. So they were raising money that then would help something that the city would already have had to pay for. And maybe a potential other direct would be like Habitat for Humanity, if they were going to rehab houses or build houses that would then increase our tax base. So I do not think that this project is actually meeting that standard, that this is not a direct benefit to the city. I think that any sort of tax revenue that we get from room tax is an indirect benefit. So I don't think that we meet it by that. The other thing that I'm quite concerned about is a precedent that if we start to have these indirect, sort of like this is going to be indirectly helping the city of Marshfield, which I love. I love all of these projects and how they indirectly help the city and how they help our citizens and help our quality of life. I love that. I love quality of life. But the precedent would then be for every other nonprofit will want us to also give money. And at this moment, I don't think our budget, I don't think we should be focusing on that. I think we should be focusing on the things that the city actually is responsible for maintaining and for growing. So I think with those two things that we actually, this would not be a good decision. As much as I would love to support this, from the city's point of view, this is not a good decision in my opinion.
Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. What's the motion on the floor right now?
The motion is to pass the resolution, the budget resolution, which was item T.
But what kind of resolution is it? Is it a standard budget resolution, or is it an emergency one?
It's a request to approve budget resolution number 2024, increasing adopted 2024 budget for the Economic Development Fund, grants, donations to other organizations by up to $100,000 for the specified purpose of a contribution to the Columbus Catholic Fieldhouse project.
If I can expand on that for a second, it's our standard budget resolution, but it's coming through on policy 4.450 under the emergency provision rather than the standard budget track that that policy would prescribe.
Okay, and I apologize, I'm repeat myself like I've done before. First off, as a lawyer in the room here, I'd be remiss if I don't bring up the fact that I think this is unlawful. both because of the separation of church and state, but then also furthermore because of the public purpose doctrine too. Furthermore, just to keep this as brief as possible, not to beat a dead horse, we need to keep in mind the bigger picture here too, as Mr. Howard said earlier today in the comments. The fact of the matter is that we also have another project that's looking into doing a very similar project here. And if we give $100,000 to this project that's already 95% funded, they'd have a perfectly good cause to ask us for another $100,000, and we'd have no good reason to say no to that. Whether it's a good idea or bad, it's irrelevant where our hands forced. Secondly, we're setting a precedent that we currently don't have. We have not, due to the near history in the last 20, 30 years, been donating to projects of this kind, of any sort. As soon as you do this, we're going to have people lining up asking for it. Now, all good causes, don't get me wrong. They're all good causes. But we don't have the budget to do that. And so there's nothing stopping anyone else from doing this. Thirdly, and most importantly, I think there's no need for the city, as good of a project as it may be, to invest in this. They're 95% funded already. They broke ground before they even knew that the city had money to potentially give away. And thirdly and finally here, we're still short on the budget. We're still at least 600,000 short, 900,000 possibly when you take into account raises that's due to staff. There is a very realistic possibility we have to dip into that 205 fund or something similar to cover these costs. And I just can't bring myself to say, yes, donating less than 1% of a project in a non-dispositive fashion, a fashion that's not going to make or break this project, is a good investment of our limited funds here as the city of Marshfield.
Alderman Werman?
I think Andrew kind of summed up some of my comments, which is just going to be me reiterating what I said last time, and that I strongly support the school systems. I think it's a great thing for the city, but at the same time, I think I'm watching other projects get shoved off to the side because we don't have the funding currently. So I do think with them raising private donations and things like that, the benefit here would be is if we could apply this to another project such as the Bram Park restoration that is currently now no longer moving forward because we don't have the funding for it. So I don't think I can support this at this time. And I hope nothing but the best for the school system. And I hope that it does great things for the city. I just think for the best interest of our funding, we should look at putting that money elsewhere.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a couple things. Why does this have to be emergency? My intention was for it to be the standard motion.
Well, there's two tracks, if you remember 4.450, and really the thought when 4.450 was written, if you think back to 2018, it was anticipating the things that we used to fund up a mansion and some of those things through the regular budget process, okay?
Right.
And so it was setting forth a process to do that you had to get an application in by August, whatever, and here's how it's to be reviewed, here's how it's to be brought forth to the council, here's how it's evaluated. But the policy also included emergency grants, and that didn't mean that the building is on fire, but what it meant is that anything that happens outside of that regular budget window, here's a way for it to happen, for a more timely providing of funds. That's the track that they're under because we're not talking about the regular budget process right now. If we were, it'd be a different type of format as prescribed in that policy, which they could go through, which I think the city attorney said they could still theoretically go through even if this resolution fails. But because we're not in the budget cycle right now, it's under the emergency track that this is being considered.
Okay, that's a little different than I understood you to explain it last time, but that may have been, fatigue or whatever. So first of all, the funds are going to come from the 205 fund. Typically, we don't take money out of the 205 to fund operations, even though our budget is short. So the 205 fund is intended for economic development. I won't belabor this point. I do feel like this is a direct benefit to the city. It's a direct benefit in the form of room tax, which I feel it's a stretch when you call that indirect. I guess it depends on how you look at it. And it's a direct benefit to the city because I think, like I said, this could change the outlook of the city. This could make us known for something, whether it's, doing tournaments or whatever. I will say a couple of things. We do invest a lot of money in our own parks, and that happens every single year. I think that we have, and this is just going out on a limb, I think we have probably a few too many parks that we can't really afford. We can't afford the maintenance of every little park that we have. This is a totally different thing. This isn't just a standalone outside park for the community to use. Secondly, the team that put this project together are some of our biggest business owners and our smartest minds in this city. And I can't just put that aside. I can't put that out of my head. When you have the Big Bang people that came together and thought about this project, believe me, they've gone through return on investment. They've gone through everything. These are some of our smartest minds in this town, and out of respect, I'm going to trust their judgment, and I will continue to vote yes. I do not feel like this is a problem defending if something came across. And as always, this council reviews every request that comes here. So if another request, you're worried about precedence, you find a reason to say yes or no to the next project. You take each project individually. By shutting the door to this project, you may be shutting the door to infinite numbers of projects that could be very beneficial, even more so than this one. So I think that's short-sighted to feel that way. We make the decisions and we make them on an individual basis. So please remember that and consider that when you vote.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I have to disagree with my friend and colleague, Ms. Spiros. But on a couple of bases. Number one is one of the first things we require of anybody seeking this is a statement of the public need and necessity for that project. Well, the word public is the one that's the one that gets me, because it's the public that it's directly supporting is basically the hotel and restaurant sector of the economy, as opposed to a broader sense of the community. I don't feel that the public need and necessity is there for the city to do this. At the last meeting, I believe, when we had a representative talk about it, he said they've already raised, I think, $1 million, and that they decided that they could do with another 100,000 or so, or bring it up, maybe another $500,000 and bring that up. I just don't see that this is not the one and the only place where they can get money. They can get it somewhere else. They've done very well. They've gotten a tremendous play from their constituency, and they're doing very well with that. I don't think they need that. I have to argue a little bit about the 205 fund. That 205 fund has taken a really big hit. And the whole idea of having a fund like that handy and having a good, healthy balance in it has always been for the what if day. What if we would get really a good company that wants to come and visit Marshfield, an industry that's going to supply us with 100 people or 150 people, and say, can you help us with something? That's what the 205 fund was for. It was in the days of the Saturn plant madness, where every community in the United States applied for the Saturn plant, including us, as a matter of fact, which you might find rather amazing. But the point is that we have invested that in a subdivision which seems to be bogged down. We also have a provision that the people who did buy or purchase the lots also have an escape clause in that at some point in time, they may ask the city to pay back what they paid for that lot in that subdivision. And that being, they would, let's see, if the lots were 47,000, we would pay them back 42,000, and the city would get to keep the whopping sum of $5,000 on the lots themselves. So that's I don't see where I don't want to touch that fund unless I absolutely have to. And I think I've talked to my colleagues, and they see it pretty much the same way. So I can't go along with this. Oh, and the last thing is, yes, I do see other nonprofits making a path to our door. And I don't think it's something that we should be addressing at all. And with that, I thank you and yield the floor.
Alderman Fire?
Well, there was a study out there, I think about 2 years ago, that Matt McLean and the group made, that I'm a member of the group. There is a need for this facility very much to make this whole process work. And my thought on this is, you know, maybe it's time the city put something into it, put some money in the game. You know, we've been doing real well in this community. Every time we have something that needs done, our hands out and we get it. We get money for the library, did it for the STEM building, for the YMCA, for the pool. Maybe it's once in a while that we should throw a couple dollars at another project that we didn't even start to make it work. I've been in the council a long time, and I think that maybe to us to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow or a week from now or next year or 10 years from now, that's a what if. And we take them one at a time, as Mrs. Spiro says. It's a one-time deal. They come in, they have to present their project, and if it's something we want to fund, we can. But I think this is a very valuable project for the city of Marshfield. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Ragle?
One last thing here. I would also like to point out that the entire project is $10.5 million. They're asking us to invest $100,000 on the front end of this. That's less than 1%, albeit just right around 1% of the project. If this project were coming under 5% under budget, we wouldn't have made a difference. If it comes in 5% over, we might have made a small difference, but not much. So even if you're of the mind that this is a worthwhile investment, investing in a private business here, I don't think it's the time to do this either. We're asking for basically an emergency motion outside of the budget process. And if you were to tell me that the entire project comes in under 3% or under 2% or under 1%, I wouldn't be surprised. And then we've just donated money that we don't have to donate to a project that didn't need it. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
No.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
Motion does not pass. Item U, request to approve resolution number 2024-27, Special Assessments 2024 East 14th Street reconstruction, presented by Josh Moritz, City Engineer.
All right, thank you. The next three items on the agenda all pertain to special assessments for 2024 construction projects. The first resolution being 2024-27 in the matter of 14th Street reconstruction between Maple and Vine Avenue. I would recommend approval of resolution 2024-27.
A motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Spiros. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That resolution passes. Thank you. Item number V, request to approve resolution number 2024-28, Special Assessments 2024 Asphalt Paving Project, presented by Josh Moritz, City Engineer.
So this resolution 2024-28 is for the 2024 asphalt paving program, which includes the following projects: Lincoln Avenue from Airport Road to 14th Street. There's an alley between Chestnut Avenue and Central Avenue, between Daggy and Edison Streets, Ash Avenue between 3rd Street and 2nd Street, Emmanuel Court, Locust Avenue, 13th Street to 11th Street, 11th Street from Adams Avenue to Locust Avenue, Luther Court, Palmetto Avenue, Blodgett Street to Daggy Street, 12th Street, Chestnut Avenue to Central Avenue, 15th Street, Peach Avenue to Palmetto Avenue, 6th Street from Maple Avenue to Cedar Avenue, 12th Street, Adams Avenue to Locust Avenue, and Galvin Avenue from 4th Street to 375 feet north. So I recommend approval of resolution 2024-28.
We have a motion by Alderman Fire, second by Alderman Spiros. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item W, request to approve resolution number 2024-29, Special Assessments 2024 Sanitary Sewer Projects, presented by Josh Moritz, City Engineer.
So this resolution pertains to the sanitary sewer projects on Maple Avenue between Central Avenue and 16th Street, as well as a sewer lateral at 3219 South Cherry Avenue. So I recommend approval of resolution 2024-29.
We have a motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Varsho. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item X, request to approve recommended changes to the Mill Creek Business Park covenants presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, these were presented to you at the last meeting on June 25th. But just to kind of recap again how we got here real briefly, I'll keep it brief because I know we went through this last time. Tom Turchi did a wonderful presentation, a PowerPoint, and covered a lot of the bases at that time. But again, just that it's been a long-term project. It began with Josh Miller and Dan Kinect, who are now both former employees, but really decided a few years ago that we needed to update the covenants as they were, more than 2 decades old, and spent a lot of time working on it, going through some various pieces of the puzzle. Many of them were smaller things in terms of some of the wording or housekeeping issues. Others were things that needed to be brought up to current standards, and it just kind of all came together in terms of a comprehensive update. The proposal was brought by Josh Miller and Tom Turchi to the various businesses out there in the park. They got a chance to meet with several of the current tenants of Mill Creek Business Park, get some comments and feedback from them. It came back to the Covenants Committee on May 29th, where they got some more feedback and they made a couple of adjustments as a result of the comments that were raised by the committee at that time. Subsequently, it's gone to the Economic Development Board on June 6th and the Plan Commission on June 18th. There's been limited feedback. The Economic Development Board did express some concern about perhaps the covenants being a little bit too much, but nothing really tangible was suggested as a particular change rather than to just simply restrict them or limit them. So at the last meeting when we presented it, since that time, one thing has been brought to light, and that is the fact that the covenant proposal does talk about the Economic Development Board having a member on the Covenants Committee. That board was disbanded at our last meeting on June 25th. Staff's recommendation is to substitute a Plan Commission member for that EDB representative on the Covenants Committee. That's now been inserted into the draft that you're looking at tonight. So at this time, I would just turn it back to the mayor here in a second for questions and comments, but ultimately staff would recommend approval of the revised covenants for Mill Creek Business Park.
We have a motion by Alderman Starver, second by Alderman Varsho. Alderman Spiros.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did serve on this Covenants Committee, and unfortunately I missed the first meeting, and I believe I made the second. I think we only had 2, maybe 3. Not sure. But anyway, I'm going to continue to oppose this simply because I think it was a good start to changing them, but I don't think that we went far enough. I continue to believe that some of the rules are too stringent, causing additional expenses to new businesses, and most of those center around, the appearance of the building or the landscaping and things like that just add additional costs. I think it's a deterrent from some places building in there. And like I say, I think it was a good start, but I didn't think it went quite far enough. So for that reason, I will be voting no.
Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Tompkins. Thank you, Mayor.
It isn't often that I get to disagree and agree with Rebecca in a single meeting, so it's rather interesting. I am opposed to this. There was a reason that the business park was built in the first place. It was meant to be something to enhance our ability to attract industries in here. And the nicer they looked, the nicer they presented the human qualities of business, the better off they were. From these things came to be in that time when we switched over from an economic development plan, which was essentially chasing smokestacks, to basically trying to find a place where the knowledge workers could come and work and feel comfortable. When I looked at the list of businesses that are out there and the ones that were visited concerning this, I noticed that, well, you got all the businesses. Yeah, you did. but you didn't go across the street to the Heritage Apartments. Those Heritage Apartments are out there because they were a good, really nice-looking place to have a rental, to be able to walk to work or bicycle to work the next day. You could have done that all easily. And it was a pleasant-looking area to look in. It still is. Still is a pleasant area. But the framers of this amendment, I think, left out the important part to find out, to talk to those people. The other thing about it is, if there were no apartments across the street from it, I would still be opposed to this because, again, we need a place. We need more places like genetic parents out there. I think this is this is in a panic over one particular problem, one particular building, and I don't think we should be changing the whole policy because of that. And with that, I'll leave you the floor.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question and then I have a statement. So this might, I don't know if Josh is around or if someone would know. This is in our packet, page 119. It was page 3 on the covenants, but it was under Article 1, if that helps at all. So it says here, as specified in Article 2B, so really I think it might need to say 1B, says in some instances, waivers, exceptions, or variance may require Plan Commission, Common Council, or zoning boards of appeal. So I'm wondering, what are those instances where it wouldn't, any of these waivers or exceptions wouldn't come to the Plan Commission or the Common Council?
Yeah, in the instance that they're only asking for a waiver from the covenants and not anything from the wellhead protection, the zoning code, or sign code, those would have their own separate processes. But if it's just a waiver from the covenants, that's when the covenant committee could grant waivers to that. So in some cases, there are covenant provisions that are added to what's already in the zoning code. If you're asking for a variance to the zoning code, that has to go to the zoning board of appeals. But if it's strictly just a covenant waiver, that would go to the covenant committee.
I think I would feel more comfortable if that could go to the covenant committee, but then again, also go through a Plan Commission and then come through the consent agenda, whatever. I think that process is a little too short just to go through one committee. I'm wondering can we do an amendment to this? Like, can we amend the motion? The motion is to approve. Can I do an amendment that instead of saying that it would be the discretion of the council for what sort of reimbursement would be done, that we would just say that a pilot would be part of the development agreement?
Yeah, I mean, you could make an amendment to reword this document in any way you see fit. I don't see any reason why that's not possible.
I feel, and the reason I would make that amendment is, as we can see in the Columbus instance, I think it's really hard to quantify what benefit people are bringing to the community that would be the reason that they don't have to pay a pilot. I think it's just cleaner. There's less political pressure if it just says, if it's a nonprofit operating within that business park, that they would pay a pilot.
If I can clarify for a minute, now you've left the one you started with. Are you looking to have an amendment to both those parts, the one requiring a variance of any type to go to the Plan Commission and Council, and also the part about the pilot reference?
Yes, thank you for clarifying. And if we need to do those as two separate amendments, that's fine as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Varsha, will you hit her amend button, please? I can't amend.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Is there a second? Alderman Stauber. Any discussion?
Which one are we amending right now? Are we doing the Plan Commission or the pilot, Mrs. Tompkins?
We can start with the Plan Commission, that any of these variances would go through the Plan Commission and then into the consent agenda for Common Council.
And Alderman Starber, are you fine with that? Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote on that amendment.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Now on to your second amendment, and if you would please clarify.
So that amendment would be that if a nonprofit chooses to operate within that business park, if we allow nonprofits, that they would pay a pilot as part of the development agreement.
Removing, and I haven't even found the page yet, but removing the phrase that talks about subject to possible negotiations with the council is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay, and Alderman Starber, are you okay to second that motion?
Can you hit her amend button again?
Okay. Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Tompkins, second by Alderman Giles. Any other discussion? Alderman Rigel?
I guess this would be a question for the city attorney, but how does he see this amendment playing out? Is it practical or impractical?
You don't have it there, do you? So I don't have that right in front of me. I typically don't have the packet, but I did go through the draft of this, and we did look at, I think originally the wording involved the pilot, and we looked at expanding that to allow you a little bit more latitude than just using a pilot. So to me, you can do that. It really, you know, a pilot can mean many different things. I'm just looking at it here just to make sure. So the current wording on this is that the city would recover a financial payment through an enforceable development agreement such that the non-taxable property use will provide the city with a financial or other benefit which would offset the loss of tax revenue despite the non-taxable use. All right, so that language was used, and Andrew, you may understand, it's more broad, allowing you more options to cover that. The concept of referencing specifically a pilot, there isn't anything necessarily wrong with that, but I think we did deliberately avoid referencing it as a pilot. Many of you've heard me speak before about pilot agreements, and my general position is those are not a good idea. The difference in this setting, though, is that it would require a development agreement, and my view is that a pilot agreement could be enforced through a development agreement, because now you have this sort of, gets into contracts 101, Andrew, where we have an exchange for one party's obligation for another. And so that's why I think that the concept of a pilot would be enforceable here. So if I was going to recommend a change to this, the way that I would probably word that is, rather than inserting the term pilot, just take out the or other benefit. So the way it would read would be that through an enforceable development agreement such that a non-taxable property use will provide the city with a financial benefit which will offset the loss of tax revenue despite the non-taxable use. That avoids the specific word of pilot, but almost any time you're doing that, it really is what you're talking about in terms of a pilot. So, to the extent that that amendment could read to just simply remove the reference or other benefit, that's fine. I will again explain, I think I did before, we kept that in there because there may be times where you are getting some other benefit, but you're not really going to get an actual financial payment through that development agreement. by removing the option to do some other benefit, you are completely removing your future ability to do that without looking at amending, once again, the covenants. But that's your call. If everybody feels more comfortable, that it's more sound, that this body can do that, and there's no problem with it. But I again would recommend that you don't insert the word pilot, just take out or other benefit.
Okay, we'll call on Alderman Werman, and then we'll ask Alderman Tompkins if she would like to re-amend her amendment to be in favor of what our attorney has put into play. Is that fair? Thank you. Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, and I don't know if, I mean, I could even make that amendment if needed, but I've heard Hap talk a lot about pilots, and I feel like if we were to throw that in here, it was kind of taking away that flexibility. I think regardless, what's going to happen is at some point, if we're going to talk about any kind of financial benefit, it's going to come to the council and that entity at that time. So I really don't have any concerns of leaving the verbiage the way it is or removing or other benefit. I think either way, we're setting ourselves up to at some point have the discussion. So I think we're good.
Alderman Spiros?
So I'm trying to recall some of the conversation around why we changed this, and it was for to give the council more latitude. I think we weren't going to pigeonhole ourselves in it, and so that is why the wording is the way that it is, because there are other opportunities that may come up or may present themselves depending on what type of business you have going in there. So I would think the wording the way that it is, we put a lot of thought into that. We got a lot of recommendations. I think it should remain the way that it is.
Okay, so we go back to Alderman Tompkins to revise your amendment. Is that correct?
Can I ask Hap a question?
Certainly.
Hap, can you give me an example of what another benefit would be, like a concrete example?
Well, the crazy part about that is it could be almost anything. I think I addressed that before. So for example, rather than saying a financial benefit, what if the developer came to the table and said that I want to move it into this, and after a certain period of time, we're going to gift land to the city at a future point in time, or we're going to engage in some type of service that will be of a benefit specifically and directly to the city. You in looking at something like that, even though there's a tangible, objective benefit that the city would receive from an agreement like that, you basically walked yourself into a position where you couldn't do it unless it was this direct financial type of benefit, like in a pilot. That's the only hang up.
All right.
I'm going to say that, you know, this is for this body. It always is. There is, and I think you addressed this previously, Natasha, and that is that one thing, by narrowing the language, you make it so that it's very objective and easy to apply in the future, and you don't have a future council trying to figure out what does that mean and maybe running amok. There is an element of that to say, if we always know it's going to be a financial benefit, then it's going to work exactly like that. There are benefits to that. This body could decide you want to go that route. On the other hand, when this was looked at, and again, in part with Josh and staff, the idea was, you know, there are some other broad benefits that maybe we're sitting here today and we don't even know what that might be. Another example would be some type of, you know, think of non-tangible benefits such as a naming a monument or something like that that would put and be beneficial to the city in terms of putting its name on the map or something like that, okay? Just going, there's just it's so wide open, you can't define it. That's the problem.
All right. I'll amend the wording just to take out other benefits.
So. Okay, cool. Yeah. So can I just kind of summarize? Maybe that one was very clear. Can I go back to the earlier one so we know what we're talking about amending? Here's the wording I would suggest to what was mentioned with the first part with respect to approval of other bodies. The second sentence in the paragraph she's referring to, which is in section B on page 3 of the covenants, changing that to say the covenant committee by majority vote may grant exceptions or waive requirements as specified in the articles 2A, 3, 4, and 5 of the covenants, subject to approval by the Plan Commission and Common Council, and also the Zoning Board of Appeals, if appropriate.
Right, and we already voted on that one.
Oh, like we voted, okay, we voted, but did we even know the wording of what was being voted on at that moment?
That's for.
Well, the motion was that it would go through.
I apologize. I thought it was being discussed as that it was going to be voted on. I apologize. I missed the motion, but in my opinion, until I just read this a minute ago, exactly how that was going to be worded was left a little bit to the imagination. So I apologize.
So first of all, what you did was voted on the amendment. So all we have is the amendment.
Okay.
If there's some confusion over what that amendment was, then we should.
Okay. I apologize.
Okay, Alderman Tompkins, you have an amendment to the motion. And if you would please, once again, just clarify.
So the motion would be that if it's a non-taxable entity, that we would remove other benefits out of the statement.
And a second by Alderman Giles. And you agree, Alderman Giles?
Yes.
Any other discussion? Alderman Stauber?
I understand both sides of the argument, and I'm wondering if maybe leaving it other benefit in with the additional word of equal or greater value, financial value. In other words, we're qualifying what type of benefit we want. Not going to be a benefit that's less than the tax increment or the taxes that we might collect. I would say equal to or greater than the financial benefit. Still leaves it open, but it also removes the floor from a low ball offer to have a naming of some kind of building to, that a future council may not understand the true value of that land.
Alderman Spiros?
My only thought process on that, Russ, would be that there may be sometimes that it's a combination. It could be a combination of money and a benefit. And I think that wording would take that out, that ability to do that out of there.
So if I could, I mean, just to play with the words, it could be and or equal benefit, greater or equal benefit. That covers your point. Was that clear as mud, Alderman Tompkins?
That's definitely as clear as mud.
What I'm trying to do is, I understand the need to not pigeonhole ourselves into strictly a financial benefit. And if we say and or benefit of equal or greater value, something to that effect, I think that accomplishes both objectives. No,
Go ahead, Alderman Tompkins. I've been waiting. Go ahead.
So I'm wondering if, because of all of this discussion, if, it feels like we almost need like a little commission just to deal with this language.
Send it back to committee?
Yeah, exactly. Send it back to committee. Okay, I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Which one?
Which one, Alderman Tompkins?
Well, we voted on the first one, so that one's done. So it's the one to take away.
Or other business is the
amendment
current
you're
one?
going to pull out back off, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, in changing of any of this language at the moment, I'm gonna withdraw.
And Alderman Giles, are you?
Not the first one that we already voted on.
No, we already have the first one done. We're voting on the second one, great. And then Alderman Varshaw has the floor.
So, Ms. Tompkins, first, we had the amendment to approve, correct? Ms. Tompkins made an amendment to change it to the word pilot. Then she made an amendment to change the wording to remove it. So now she's pulling back her 2 amendments that she made? Or no, just the one?
Correct. I'm pulling back the entire amendment. So
You had 2 amendments. You had one to change it to pilot, and then one amendment to change the wording. So you're pulling back both of your amendments.
And
Thank you.
And the very first amendment was already voted on. Yes.
Correct. The second part of the amendment motion. So in other words, there obviously is not a second part of amendment. Is that correct? Because you took that out of there. Okay. So now we are to vote on the first amendment. Boy, this is something, isn't it? Man alive.
We are back to approving the Mill Creek Business Covenants with the amendment of the subject to approval of the Plan Commission.
Just what she said. How's that? Okay, so please vote. We have a motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Varsho. Any other comments, questions? I see none, so please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
That motion passes. Because we have 4 nays and we have 6 ayes. Yes, 6 ayes. Boy, oh boy. Request to approve the 2024 Building Revitalization Grant Program presented by Josh Miller, Cedar Corp., and Kaylee Gomez, Executive Director, Main Street, Marshfield.
Okay, so Josh Miller and I are here to give you a little bit of history of the facade grant program and then talk a little bit about what it is today, which is the Building Revitalization Grant Program. He's going to provide some history now.
Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Council. The facade program started back in 2009 as part of a TIF program. That was part of the TID4, the downtown lighted TIF that we have. And that was to provide assistance for businesses that were going to improve their facade. At that time, only facade exteriors that were facing the street were eligible projects. And primarily because it was TIF related, that's all we were kind of limited to doing. And so that lasted for a number of years. The city actually received a state award for the program, and it has helped over 70 different projects, fund 70 different projects throughout its time. In 2015, up through 2015, that was really limited to just the facade program or the exterior projects. In 2018, we added back alley improvements. We realized that a lot of businesses really didn't have very clear entrances from the back alley, and a lot of the parking is in the back. The city provides a lot of public parking. And so we tweaked that program to improve back alley entrances, both doorways, parking, things like that. And then in 2020, we allowed it to be an interior conversion program. So if there was underutilized space, so second floor underutilized space converting to apartment units, and then lower level underutilized space converting to entertainment, drinking, and eating establishments, really in line with the downtown master plan, trying to encourage more activity and more vibrancy in the downtown. So that was in place in 2020. And then in 2022 or 2021, we kind of shifted the review process. Had been primarily done by staff. So when we get these applications in, staff would review it with Main Street, and then there would be a budget set by the Economic Development Board each year, approved by the Common Council. We worked within those parameters. It was a 50-50 grant. So if the developer put in let's say $5,000, the city could match it with $5,000 of eligible projects. And so our policy and our grant application spelled out which projects were eligible and which ones were non-eligible. And so then it shifted in 2021, shifted to the Main Street Design Committee to review that as part of a review process to help kind of make sure that the design guidelines of the downtown that were newly adopted were enforced and applied. In 2022, we split the program from the interior facade or interior conversion program and facade program into 2 separate programs. So one, you could apply for one or the other. And as we went through the process, that kind of got a little confusing. So we're actually bringing those back together in this year. So this has been going on since 2009. So it's been 14 years of successful program. All told, the city has invested about $760,000 in the downtown businesses. And the private investment's been over $2.3 million with that. So it's been a really successful program. If you look at the downtown 15 years ago, what it used to look like versus what it does now. Now, granted, the city also put a lot of investment into the streetscape and that, but just looking at the facade program part of it, it's done wonders for the downtown. And as Howard's had talked about earlier today, it's becoming a vibrant downtown, and there's not a lot of space, vacant space, which is wonderful. So typically we've had this program adopted through the Economic Development Board, which is no longer exists. And that was usually done in early part of the year. Now we're sitting in July. We still haven't adopted the program. We are running out of construction months for this year. So we bring this to the council for consideration. There's been some minor changes to it. The one thing I will add is we had an $81,000 number in the program. The budget for it was actually $70,000. The additional $11,000 was unspent money from last year that was intended to be carried forward, but that didn't happen. So we will be changing that to $70,000. And if there are additional requests, talking to Jennifer, the finance director, we could come back with a budget resolution in order to help match additional projects. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kaylee to talk about this year's program.
Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the description and the application in the packet. It should be pretty straightforward. The reason that there were two descriptions at one point was because when we looked at the facade program, we looked at the downtown master plan and our community survey that we did a few years ago. Obviously, restaurants and housing are a top need for our community. So we had to rewrite a description for that purpose. So it just ended up happening to be two descriptions. And now we've had the opportunity to combine them together. I think it's very clear. I think it's clear what qualifies as facade, what qualifies as interior conversions. And the design guidelines truly do guide our committee through the process of what would qualify as historic revitalization or some new build as well. Any questions for us?
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Giles. Alderman Stauber, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. The one question that I have, and I think it was Administrator Barb mentioned it during a meeting, the return on investment for an interior renovation versus a facade renovation. Can someone speak to that a little bit? Bang for your buck, renovating interiors?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the interior conversion part, I mean, I can't give you dollar for dollar figure, but I know exterior renovations obviously do help the assessed value, but I also think having a viable business and an active business also does that as well. I don't know if it's the same dollar for dollar, but activating a space that's underutilized or vacant is critical in having a vibrant downtown. So there is a benefit, and just maybe it's not a tangible, we've talked a lot about tangible and non-tangible benefit tonight, but just having that active space versus having a property sit vacant is very valuable. And a lot of the businesses that are just starting off don't have the capital, and any capital assistance in the interior conversion can really be the difference between a business not succeeding and one that does succeed.
Let me ask a follow-up question if I could, Josh. So during the review of an application, would you weight the interior conversion stronger or higher than you would a facade renovation?
I think it depends. It's possible. I guess I don't know if you want to address that.
It really depends on the applicants that year. You notice that there's some language about major economic driver. We kind of have a little bit of a running list for the buildings that are in the most need that would make the most impact as far as density inside. And then, if they were serving multiple business tenants inside, that would be weighed as well. Multiple housing units. It really depends on the applicants every year.
Thank you.
And if I can add to those two answers by Kaylee and Josh, the interior conversions tend to produce a greater increase in the tax base. And they really do. I mean, if you talk to the assessor, that's normally the result. But the facade grants produce an invaluable benefit to the community in terms of the appearance of the downtown and the vibrancy and what those types of upgrades have done to downtown Marshfield. So they have value in slightly different ways, but they're both important.
Alderman Spears, then Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Werman, then Alderman Tompkins.
So, okay, I just have a couple of clarification questions. I like this program, but when the applicants apply, it used to go to the EDB for approval?
Go ahead.
It did not initially. The EDB started approving them, I think it was last year or the year before. When the EDB got involved, they got involved because there was either a dispute about something meeting the design guidelines. So in one case, a project wanted to do something that was not in line with the design guidelines. So they came to the Economic Development Board for approval kind of as an appeal to what the design committee had done. And then I believe the EDB approved funding for that. So, and then after that last year, I think the EDB approved funding for both projects. I don't know if it went to the design committee after the fact, but I know the EDB has gotten involved in a little bit, but primarily it's been staff or the Main Street Design Committee.
Okay, so just a question, a follow-up on that. So the approval comes as a combination of staff and the design committee. So you have a set rule of how the building should look. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I had heard from a business person who wanted to apply for the grant and wanted to paint the building a specific color and was denied because of the color, paint choice color. Is that real? Are we really doing that?
Yes, so it depends on the building though, I will say. So Great Eye Axe Throwing, really good example of a building that didn't have any historic preservation that could be done to that building, so they could wrap it fully in vinyl siding, no problem. What comes into a problem is downtown in and of itself, especially in rural communities, can be considered a cultural heritage site. So you've got these historic buildings that can't be replicated, and the brick would be considered historic material. So what we wouldn't recommend in a downtown for revitalization is painting brick. Other things you can paint. I mean, siding you can paint window, you can paint wood, anything, but the brick is something, it's not healthy for the brick either, and it does start to deteriorate the building a little bit, depending on what you use.
So your restriction is on painting brick?
For the most part, yeah.
And that's because of the historic preservation and things like that?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, that's my only question.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I'm really happy about with this program is the interior design or the interior work they're doing. As you know, as those of us who have been on the council for more than 6 months, we know that one of the things, one of the recurring themes we keep hearing about what is economic development, it also says that it is housing. And we have developed a lot of money, a lot of time into trying to develop more housing for the city. What we haven't done exactly, but we hope to do, I think, is we want a lot more of that mixed commercial. That basically there can be a business downstairs and there can be residences upstairs, one or more residences upstairs. I think this is going to give us a great chance to whittle away at the housing deficit numbers, which, God, they're all over the map. I don't know what to believe anymore. But the point is that we can't, this is a source of new housing for us. And of course, if the West 2nd Street project comes along, that'll be a big chunk into that world. So hopefully we'll get along with this. I'm going to support this because I think it's killing two birds with one stone. We can provide the renovation of downtown, we increase property values, and at the same time, we're providing housing. So I will be supporting this.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, agreed. We'll definitely be supporting this, and thank you both for all of your fantastic work on this. This is a great initiative. I remember hearing about the facade project last year. It's fantastic. The couple questions I had were going to be one, like the back alley facades. So one of the restrictions I saw in here is that no landscaping would be done. I think a lot of that probably would involve some landscaping. So are there exceptions to that, or does that just fall on the business owners?
In regard to this project, because landscaping can kind of change with the business use itself, I think that landscaping is really important for creating a welcoming back entrance, which is why we created a new grant through Wood County Ready funding, the Welcome Back Grant, and that addresses business-specific back entrance welcoming features like landscaping. So it is available through a separate fund, but this facade is very specific to building, and that something would stay with the building.
Okay. And that was a big part of my question. I'm sure like a lot of people here are familiar with the back facades that face the library and Royal Tokyo there. Like I know some of those are a lot older, but a lot of that would involve a lot of landscaping as well. So the other question I had was going to be some of the restrictions, well, I shouldn't say restrictions, some of the requirements for the application. It requires like a set of drawings and requires bids from contractors. I think at least 2 it said, and then preferably local. I've been in construction for a long time, so I've seen a lot of bids come from, Joe Schmo's brother. So like, is there any kind of restriction on the bids? And then are we offering up resources to people like, here's a list of vendors that we'd recommend reaching out to or anything like that early on in the application process so that they could go out to some reputable businesses?
That is something that we have desired to put out to the district a little bit more readily. That's something that's in the works. I don't know if it's going to be available immediately to people, but we do allow for Joe Schmoes, but we don't allow for people who are not following city code.
Copy. Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. Again, I echo everyone that this is a fantastic program. I have a question since this was in our meeting today. Do you have any guidelines for if a nonprofit applies for this? Because there wouldn't be a direct, if it was an interior, if it was an exterior, I can see how it stays with the building and there would be a future direct increase to our tax base if the building was sold. But for the internal, if it's a nonprofit, do you have any guidelines for whether they are participating in this program?
Yeah, currently they would not qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Varsho?
There's a couple facade programs awarded last year, correct? How long does it take for those buildings to get redone?
Typically 1 to 2 years.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I just want to add a couple things, going back to what Josh noted earlier about the amount available. Yeah, I had not gotten a carryover of the money from 2023 accomplished through a continuing appropriations resolution. So there were roughly just under $12,000 left from the 2023 budget that were not, they kind of lapsed, if you will. So if this is passed, I'm going to bring forward a budget resolution to get those monies added so that it does represent the $81,994.44 noted in the document that you have in your packet. That would be no new additional funding. That would just be representing the monies that were left on the table last year, in addition to the monies that were budgeted for 2024. The other thing I want to briefly note is I go to the Historic Preservation Commission meetings, and I've shared this before with Kaylee and maybe others, and Aaron knows this, having been on that body. They would like the opportunity to review not the interior conversion grants, but they would like to review the facade grants applications. They know full well they have no authority. It would just be to comment and get some thoughts in before decisions are made. So we'll work through that too.
Yes, Kaylee.
We invited them to be a part of the design committee review process, to have one person be a part of that conversation. So we're working that out.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
Motion passes. Hallelujah.
Thank you.
Item Z, review options for next steps related to the bid received to build permanent restrooms at Wenzel Family Plaza, presented by Harold Wolfgram, City Attorney, and Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Yeah, do you want to start? We haven't really talked about this.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this. I'll just, I can. So there were questions raised regarding the bid and the position the city was in regarding the bid that was presented. And as I reviewed that, I basically made the recommendation that we kind of put a pause on everything at this point. And in fact, I went through and was able to get an agreement that there wouldn't be charges for the bid process that recently was gone through, that presented the current bid for this particular project. That leaves the council open to make a decision in regard to this. You could send it back out for bids. You can review all the different options that have been discussed, and I think that's at your discretion. But basically, my recommendation from a legal position is that we hold off on the bids that were received, and if anything, you go back and get a new bid.
And if I could take it from there, the rest of the presentation, and I apologize for the fact that City Attorney and I had not spoken about this. I actually covered part of what he just said in my memo. But as a result of what he said, really the city, in my opinion, the council has 5 options, 4 of which I listed in my memo and 1 of which I'd like to add. The first would be to accept the bid and move ahead with the project, and we're clearly recommending against that based upon the recommendation of the City Attorney after reviewing the bid process. The next would be to reject the bid and direct staff to rebid the project, with the city being the lead player in that bidding process. The third would be to reject the bid and direct staff to evaluate other potential alternatives, both on and off site. The fourth would be to reject the bid and put the project on hold for further study until a time to be determined later. And the fifth that I'm adding this evening would be to reject the bid and establish a committee, potentially of members of the council and possibly staff and certainly community or downtown business people who are affected to look at the various alternatives and come back to the council with recommendation. So in my opinion, those would be your choices tonight.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho. Is there a second to that motion? And then we'll get to the comments.
Tell you what the motion is.
Okay.
I will make a motion to reject the bid, direct staff to reevaluate potential alternatives both on and off site, especially with the new owner of the Blodgett House, to reach out to them to see what alternative we can to use the bathrooms within that facility.
And Alderman Spears, are you in agreement?
Yes.
Thank you. First, Alderman Tompkins, then Alderman O'Reilly, then Alderman Stauber.
I personally think that we should reject the bids because we are following the advice of our lawyer. But I would like a staff to go out to bid. We've already looked at all the options. Renting right now would be $24,000 a year. In 10 years, we've done the project costs and we would still need to continue to rent. So it doesn't make sense business-wise. So I'm not going to support the motion.
Alderman O'Reilly.
Thank you. I do support the motion. I do like the idea of having community involvement. I guess the stakeholders in that area, the developers in that area, I think Main Street should be involved in that. And I would just consider, if staff is going to move forward with this, to at least reach out and have some involvement with them. So I will be supporting this.
Alderman Stauber.
A little bit different topic, but I'm trying to understand the arrangement that we have with Bozen Company. It seemed to me we hired them as a project manager. And when they're hired as a project manager in that role, how they handle the bidding is really up to them. And I'm not 100% sure of this, but if the bidding were to be handled directly by the city, then we'd have a different set of rules to follow. Am I correct in my summary?
I mean, to generalize that, any public improvement project requires you to follow specific bidding rules. So I don't think that you're in any different rules that would apply for that particular project. You could subcontract, as would have been the case here, with another organization to go through that bidding process, but you got to follow the specifics in terms of statutory bidding process. So the rules don't change just because we've subcontracted it out.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Fire.
With my history in the city of Marshfield for 24 years, going on 25, I can't remember when we've ever been into a building. We always tend to own our own buildings. So I don't think we should get into the rent a building, because technically it's a short-term fix. You know, and they say we have it for 10 years and they sell the building and the next owner decides to buy it and doesn't want us in there. Now we're out on the street. So I think that if you're going to have a bathroom in that area, you should own it and preserve it and clean it.
Alderman Spiros.
I think building a 2-stall bathroom is a short-term solution. I think we're all going to discover that building a 2-stall bathroom will not be big enough. We'll either be renting porta potties, or we'll have to add onto the building. So for me, building a 2-stall building is also a temporary $250,000 plus solution. I think renting is perfectly fine. We're not locked into doing this for 10 years. We don't know what will happen with the interest rates. We don't know what will happen with the cost of building materials. All of that is skyrocketed right now and due to change probably in November or slightly thereafter, January. So I look at you know, all of these reasons not to do or not to look at other alternatives as also temporary things. We all know that a 2-stall bathroom isn't going to be sufficient for long enough, and they'll be back here asking to add on to it or do something like that, or continue to rent porta potties for big events. So to me, that's also a temporary solution. I would just really caution this council, you don't throw good money after bad. I mean, that's just, it's unfortunately, we've already invested some money and are probably walking away with nothing, but don't continue to throw good money after bad.
Alderman Werman?
Okay, so I'm probably playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, and I apologize because it's probably going to leave everybody with just a what the hell did he just say kind of moment. But I think we need a permanent solution, and I don't think anybody's necessarily right on this. I don't think renting is going to be that solve. I do support the motion because I think we've run out of options. I think we're at an impasse. I think we're not going to all agree on something. We could force through a vote that's probably going to just mess with a bunch of people or upset a bunch of people. But my biggest concern right now is no matter what we do, it sounds like we're advising not to move forward with the bids. So if we do anything else from here on out, what would stop any bidder from coming in and providing that exact same number that we've already received? That's all public knowledge. So at that point, I mean, we've done exactly what we talked about before. We've pigeonholed ourselves. We've put ourselves at a number, and why would anybody else come in at less than that? Because they know we've already accepted that as a city. So I think we need to go back and reevaluate our options. I do think renting is not the right answer, but obviously building the way we were planning to build wasn't making everyone happy. So I think we have an opportunity here to Rebecca's point, to like go and actually reevaluate this. Maybe 2 stalls is enough. Maybe building supplies are going to change. And we have a real opportunity to do it right. But at the same time, I think when it comes to renting, I think we're putting ourselves in a bad position. I think we're putting the potential owner in a bad position. Like, what happens if somebody vandalizes that area? Who's responsible for it? What if there's an injury in there? You know, what if somebody commits a crime within there? Like, there's a lot of stuff that is not considered. We're just talking very quickly about solutions. And so I think we really need to go back and sit down, and whether that takes a committee or whether we just bring a couple options and talk openly, regardless, I think we don't have the right solution right now. And we've put ourselves in a position where we can't move forward with the bids as is or the drawings as is. So we're going to have to do something different.
Alderman Wagner, then Alderman Ragel, and then Alderman Varsha, then Alderman Tompkins. Alderman Wagner?
Okay, thank you. I think people are going to find this very strange coming from me. But what I think I would plead the council for tonight is patience. I think that, you know, at the onset when this building was designed, this subject came up, and we sought advice from other people who did the same thing. And then we basically said, you know, it's not a good idea to do this now. And we also talked about the possibility that as this project continues, hopefully, there will be opportunities opening up with some space down the line that could be adjacent to or up on the same lot as this project is going. But to all of a sudden jump on it and think that it's an emergency that has to be handled right now, I don't believe that. I don't believe it's an emergency. And I do ask you for patience, because we actually did some planning for putting this thing in. And we know what that corridor needs to look like. We know what opportunities there are for housing and for business and for entertainment. We know what's there because we've looked at it. And if somewhere along that line, this bathroom issue will get solved. Not if we keep ripping the scab off of it, though. So anyway, I'm asking you to exert some patience. Thank you.
Alderman Ragel?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions here. First, is the it's been a long day, I apologize. Has the Blodgett house actually been sold, or is it still in discussion at this point?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Aaron Howard's going to address that from the podium.
No.
I'm sorry. That's a good point.
Before I address that, I'd like to address another comment if you don't mind, because, is that okay?
No, it's not okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's quite all right.
So it has not been sold, but right now, she is in the process of meeting with the realtor to put an official offer in. There was a lot of little things that we had to look into in order to, for example, she's going to be doing a sprinkler system. And initially we had thought that we would have to have a certain kind of pipe that would go through. And luckily, when the city redid Central Avenue, you guys already thought of that. So there's like little things like that that we wanted to check off the boxes, so to speak. So it's in the motion, it's all done. So I can't think of, it's in the process of the actual paperwork.
Thank you.
Okay, but it's not sold.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Okay, thank you. I just want to confirm, so it's not sold, it's in the final stages, but it's not final.
No, it is not final. But she has gone through, oh, okay.
No, I mean, it was just, yeah, I appreciate it. I didn't mean to cut you off. That was not my intent, but no, and then to my recollection there too, it's not ADA compliant in its current state and form. Is that correct as well?
I mean, you might as well stay up there. He's going to ask.
I mean, I guess, well, mainly just to retract that question here. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or delay it.
There is an ADA accessible bathroom that would be a part of this, yes, already there.
There is, okay.
Yes, and additional ones could be tweaked to be made ADA accessible with very, very little funding.
Okay, cool, thank you. And then, hold on, there's one more question. I don't know who it was for. No, that's it, thank you, appreciate it.
Alderman Varsho?
So I just respectfully, because I really respect his decision and whatnot, but respectfully with Mr. Fire's comment, we've rented the communications department out for as long as I've been on the committee. The communication departments we've been renting that facility for them to use. So we are renting a facility. I think that renting this would, 5 years down the road, we might have a Second Street corridor program that gets off the ground, which may develop that street and whatnot. There might be something that we put in. There might be huge bathrooms that are put in if we develop that Second Street corridor program. So I just think that this is the good way to go at this time.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have just a few comments in regards to Mr. Wagner asking for patience. On Focus had an article in October of 2022. So that was the last council. It was not with the new council members. That said, the council has decided to go ahead with building bathrooms, and they will be on the north side of the plaza behind the pergola. So that was in a newspaper article from a year and a half ago. So we have had a lot of patience with this project. We have worked and worked on this project. We have had so many votes on this project, whether we should take it to bid, whether we should not. So just to say, hey, let's pause and look at other options. Renting's not a great option, in my opinion. We have looked at the Out of the Blue tattoo building, that renovation and buying the building over budget. We've looked at Baltus, crossing the street and going to Baltus, over budget for renovating that building. Like every option we've looked at, the only thing that has worked has been to build. In regards to people who have said you will need more than 2 stalls, when there are big events, Dairy Fest, Hub City, those places are the ones who rent the extra bathrooms. It is not the city footing that bill. So the 2 bathrooms have worked. The 2 porta potties for capacity have worked, except for they overflow. So having a flushable toilet would work better. And then I have a question. What one of the possibilities is for number 2 is to direct city staff to do the bidding, which I'm a little bit confused about what Mr. Werman's saying, because I think what we do is we correct anything that had any sort of thing that had gone wrong with the bidding process, and we do it the way that the city wants to do it, the way that our legal counsel is recommending it. So I'm a little bit confused of that comment because I think we just rebid it, and I don't know what the problem would be with that.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, just to clarify, so we're rebidding it, but we're rebidding off of the same set of drawings and the same standards. So essentially, any contractor, and Mike's probably experienced this being, in electrical, if he were to see the number on a project, he knows what that number is. So he could theoretically beat that number, or he could come in and say, well, you're going to pay this guy, and here, I'll do it for $1,000 less. And you don't have to say that out loud because now they've seen the numbers. So any contractor could come in and say, I'm going to do it for this much money because I know they approved this much money. So that's the hard part, is like we've kind of opened ourselves up to a vulnerability there. So even if we're rebidding it through a different process, we're still rebidding the same standards and drawings. So that's where that concern comes in. I will agree with you that we did exhaust almost every option. We looked at so many buildings around there, and to argue Mr. Varshaw's point, we actually completely shut down the idea of renting communications any longer. We looked at that as an option. So I think it's something that we've learned over time. So I don't want to keep repeating mistakes. It's like we have learned that renting isn't the way to go. But I do think that one of the biggest problems we have is we get some money as a council, and that money burns a hole in our pocket hotter than a hot pocket. So I think what we need to do is reevaluate how we spend that money and when we spend that money. And the best way to do that is going to be to do what Brian said and evaluate those options before we move forward. Which brings me to the one question I wanted to ask Steve in the city, I guess, mayor, administrator app. What happens with that money if we decide to put this project on hold? Do we just sit on it for a while? Or, I think we walk away from the money that we've already paid to Bozen for project managing, or what do we do with that? What happens to that agreement and the finances?
The agreement would be voided, but the monies that have already been paid for design and architectural services to date have been expended, and those would just be lost. That would be the end product of that process.
So, and I may have to review the agreement to understand this, but hypothetically, we wanted to move forward with a plan to build permanent restrooms, but we want to make alterations. Because we've already had that agreement with Bozen, we've done those drawings, are we able to manipulate those without having to go back to a full new set of drawings somewhere?
Are those our property, so to speak?
Well, kind of, but also are we able to, I guess, do we own that now? Are we able to take that, provide it to somebody else and say, hey, this is a drawing we have, we just want to make some tweaks to it? Or could we even continue the partnership with Bozen to say, you know what, we're not going to take those bids, but we do have the drawings from you guys. We want you guys to make changes to that. It seems like it gets really muddy now, and the relationship is kind of gray as a result. So,
yeah, my view of that is you would be able to contract for that however you wanted to at that point. So my understanding is we've paid for the design. That was part of an initial part of this process, and that's been paid. What was recently done with the bidding process, and we just kind of voided it out.
Okay.
What had happened? I'll just put it that way. That part of the contract is void. You'd go back and reset that. Could you do that with Bozen? Sure, you'd have to contract with them to do that. And I think, they were very, very accommodating. I will say that. So wide open as far as I'm concerned. We may have to sort some parts of that out, but I think you'd be able to do. So if you wanted on that design or move forward with that design, that would be an option for you to look.
I think that leaves us in a more positive spot. So at least it wasn't an entire waste of money. And that's kind of what I was hoping for there.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I guess what I'll say is supporting this, I think, is a good idea. And the reason being that one thing that we've learned through, or at least I have learned through this entire process, through a lot of discussions with the community and also downtown people, is that I don't believe we have reviewed all the possibilities. There are ideas out there that we have potentially not heard yet. And I would remind everyone, this is economic development money that's being used. And in reality, what I've heard from the businesses down there is this could impact development to the point that it actually hurts our economic development of that area. So it would be kind of ironic that we would move forward with something with economic development money that has the potential to actually decrease economic development in that area. So I would just caution that through the review process, everyone should be talked to and everything should be on the table to get our best possible outcome.
I was going to say this anyway. It's okay, Mayor?
Yes.
But playing especially off the comments of Councilmember O'Reilly, I would really advocate for something closer to option 5, the one I added that was not in your memo, establishing a committee to study this issue, including members of the downtown community, perhaps Main Street, Kaylee, others, a couple of council members, a staff person or two. I mean, there have been questions raised as to whether the staff, whether our search was exhaustive to begin with. And I don't want to come back and have that still be a potential issue. So I would plead out there that if the alternative is the idea that we should take a look at all the alternatives, that we look more at a committee model and have that committee bring something back to the body so that it's very clear that, you know, different voices and different things have been looked at beyond what staff might bring forward. And again, that's not to criticize staff, that's not to criticize the concerns that have been raised, but that would be a more exhaustive review, and I think that would be healthy. I really do.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you again. No, I agree with you, Steve. I think at this point in the process, that is a logical approach. And I guess I don't know if I could amend that to include a committee. I'm not usually a big fan of all these committees by any stretch, but I think that having involvement with that community in the area is instrumental in keeping relationships intact, getting their viewpoints on the impact of the businesses they've invested in that area. So I guess, I don't know, is it appropriate to amend it at this point? Or do we have to? Formally? Yeah.
If that's what you want, you would need
Okay.
to amend it. And if you would, are you including who's on the committee in
Yeah,
your
I can.
amendment?
I think what I would suggest would be having whatever, I don't know, I guess we can come up with a number of the committee, but I think it would be appropriate to include Main Street. I think we should have multiple people, developers and business owners in that downtown area. Maybe one council member. And maybe finance staff and someone. So I don't know, I'm kind of open to what anybody would want, but I think, in my opinion, that's the best approach to move forward.
We have a motion to amend. Is there a second to amend the motion? Second by Alderman Spiros. Any other discussion? Please vote to.
No.
Okay, here we go.
Hang on.
Alderman Marshall.
Hang on. Okay, so if we're going to have a committee, I obviously think that Mr. O'Reilly should be on that committee. 2 aldermen, Mr. Barg, the head of Parks and Rec, the head of Main Street Marshfield. And I think that's about it. I mean, we're going to send it out, obviously, for bids, so we don't really need any construction people in there. I understand what Mr. O'Reilly's getting at. I really do. But Main Street Marshfield, the head of Main Street Marshfield, 2 aldermen, Mr. Barg, the head of Parks and Recs, Mr. Casperson. I mean, I think the 5 of them would be able to, maybe even Mr. Turchi, since he is, the guru around everything that gets built around here. So, I mean, I really don't think, 6 people, I think that would be logical for.
Maybe one more business community voice?
Sure, at large business community voice.
That we find out?
Oh,
Yeah,
sure,
to get
at
one more.
large citizen. Yeah, sounds good to me, but I think that's, 2 aldermen, Mr. Barg, at large citizen, Mr. Turchi, Mr. Casperson. It's a good, finance, well, she's, gonna take a look at everything we do anyway. So she obviously should be there as well. So, but that's my thoughts on the committee.
Alderman Stauber, Alderman Werman, then Alderman, Alderman Tompkins. Alderman Stauber?
Yeah, I'm in line with Alderman Varsho and as far as limiting the size of the committee, but having a diverse committee. And if the motion and second would agree to that, I could support the amendment.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, I just get a little hesitant about having business owners involved simply for the logical thought of conflict of interest, you know?
Business owner.
Oh, we talked about okay. I was going off of the original motion. Yeah, you're good.
Yep.
Totally understood. Yep,
Not a
so
business
I would agree to that. The one recommendation I would make is we do have an employee, I believe, who does event planning at Wenzel, right? True. I would highly recommend that person be involved, because if we're going to be building bathrooms that are supposed to support events there, it only makes sense that that person would be part of that committee.
That's a great idea.
Alderman Tompkins?
I just needed clarification. Mr. Werman and Mr. Varsho, are you saying that one of the committee people would be a community member at large, but not a business person?
Correct, at-large business, or an at-large community member.
Okay, because I agree that if it was a business person, especially someone with property in downtown, there would be a conflict of interest.
Correct, absolutely, at-large community member.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend.
Is that an amendment, Mr. Varsho? Because right now, our motion is the amendment from Mr. O'Reilly, which was Main Street developers or business owners, someone from downtown, one council and finance.
Oh, I thought we were just discussing the members according to his amendment. So that's what he amended?
Correct.
This is really fun.
All right, so we are going to amend.
I can agree with yours to skip this process if that would work out.
Can we do that? Can Mr. O'Reilly agree with, or no? No, we cannot. So I will amend it to have one community at large member for this committee, two council people, Mr. Barg, Mr. Turchi, Nicole Anderson, the director of the Wenzel Plaza, Mr. Casperson, and obviously we will go through all our findings with finance, with Jennifer.
Did you still want someone from Main Street? That
And Main Street director. Did I catch everybody?
Amend button.
Amend. I can't.
There
we
you
go.
did it.
There you go.
And I have a second by Alderman Spiros. Alderman O'Reilly, did you want to make another comment? Okay, thank you very much. So now, as everybody understands, we're voting on the amendment, which was stated by Alderman Varsho, which overrode Alderman O'Reilly's, which he agreed to overriding the amendment. Wow, that Alderman Varsho did. So now let's skip the rope a couple times and turn the vacuum cleaner on, and please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
That motion passes. So we have to go back and...
So now you're voting on the amendment, which is now what Mr. Varsho just said.
Okay, now we're going to clear the slate and then we're going to vote on the amendment.
Correct.
Okay. And we have a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions?
Can you read the motion?
No? Okay.
Right now, the motion is voting on the amendment, which is now, as it stands, amended to be Mr. Varsho's previous two council members, Mr. Barg, Mr. Casperson, Ms. Gomez, Mr. Turchi, a citizen community member at large, Ms. Zelensky, and Ms. Anderson.
And if I can jump in, I was just talking to Mr. Wolfgram, Attorney Wolfgram, about the idea of who the two council members are going to be. And I guess right now I'd look for your recommendation on either who those two would be or how those two would be determined.
Alderman Spiros?
My recommendation for the council appointees would be the chair of finance and the chair of the Board of Public Works.
Alderman Werman?
I was actually going to recommend that I think at least Mr. Fire should be on that because I believe that is his district. So it's not only economic development, that we're considering as a council, but it's also his district, so.
So I would propose, because of that, this is a good reason to bring it up, that a motion be made by one of the members here, and you decide this based on a motion. So if somebody wants to make a motion for all of them, somebody wants to make a motion for one of them, or however you want to do it, but you have the opportunity right now to get it done.
Okay, Alderman Spiros, then Alderman Werman, then Alderman Tompkins.
All right, I will make a motion that the council appointees be the chair of the Board of Public Works and the chair of the Finance Committee.
And we have a second by Alderman O'Reilly.
No, that's the old one. You need to hit your amend button,
Okay,
please.
so you need to, please. So then we have a motion by Alderman Spiros, but do not have a second
Can you hit
at
your
this point.
amend button, please?
We have a second to Alderman Varsho. Alderman Werman, then Alderman Tompkins. Oh, Alderman Werman turned his light off because it needed. Okay, Alderman Tompkins, did you want to speak yet?
I was still going to go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I hit it too fast. So my thought would be, I think finance makes perfect sense. I do think because of funding being involved here, I think that finance makes sense. I would, however, say that I still think the representative for that district should be the other person on there. So I could make an amendment, but I feel like we're going to be going back and forth. So I don't know if we need to vote on this first or have more discussion, but I would love to hear other people's thoughts because I think that makes the most sense. If it was my district, I would want to be involved regardless of whoever the chair was for whatever departments.
Alderman Tompkins?
I would agree with Mr. Werman that it would make sense to have the alderperson for that district on that committee. I would also say that maybe people could, I would like to be on that committee, so maybe we could also have it where people are voted to be on that committee.
Alderman Spiros?
I think we're losing sight of what we're doing here. If we're gonna just do that and vote whoever wants to be on it, then I want to be on it too. We just might as well involve the whole council. Let's put the whole council on the committee. At some point, we have to make some decisions here. The reason I went with the Board of Public Works is because Mike is involved in the industry. He knows about bidding, he knows about projects, he knows about electrical. He's been in this business for years and years and years. So not just relying on his expertise as a member of this council, but his expertise out of, that he normally carries, that he does for a living. It's not typical that we look at the member of the district and always do that. I mean, I've never ever heard anybody say, well, the member of that district should be on it because they're a member of that, or they're the council person for that district. I am not opposed to that necessarily, but we've just never done that before. So that was my thought process in putting Mike on there. I think that 2 members is enough, and we should just decide who that should be.
Any other questions, comments? So do we vote on 1 member and then vote on the other 2 members?
We have a motion.
Yep, we have a motion on the floor by Alderman Spiros, second by Alderman Varsho. Seeing no other, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
No.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
It's a tie, Mayor.
I'm going to vote yes.
You vote.
Oh. So that motion carries. Thank you. Item AA, request to.
No, that was just an amendment. We
geez.
still have to go back. I just have to get these down really quickly, please.
Oh, yeah. Where's the elephant I can ride? Okay, and next is?
Hang on just 1 second. I'm making So now we're back to the first amendment, which is now amended to be Mr. Varshow's committee of 2 alder people being the Public Works Chair, the Finance Chair, Mr. Barg, Mr. Casperson, Ms. Gomez, Mr. Turchi, Citizen Community Member at Large, Ms. Zielinski, and Ms. Anderson. That is now the current vote because it's been several amendments.
Can
you read that one more? Sure. This is still an amendment, and this is that let me go back to the whole entire thing, that you would be rejecting the bid for Wenzel Plaza restrooms and directing staff to evaluate other potential alternatives, including developing a committee for review, which would include the chair of the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee, the Chair of Board of Public Works, Mr. Barg, Mr. Casperson, Mrs. Gomez, Mr. Turchi, a citizen community member at large, Ms. Zielinski, and Ms. Anderson.
We have a motion by Alderman O'Reilly, second by Alderman Spears, and do you agree with that, Alderman Spears, as a second? Any other comments, questions? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say that this issue has been very politicized. We've had Mr. O'Reilly very vocal on social media against this entire project. I have been publicly humiliated and bullied. And we have now put 2 people on this committee who have consistently voted against these bathrooms. So I am no longer going to support. I was actually going to support the motion, but I feel like now we have developed a committee that is no longer objective, and so I will not support it.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
No.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
Mayor?
That motion passes. And that is all?
No, now we're back to the original motion as amended.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Speros. Any other comments, questions?
Your motion is
Yes, that's
to
what we're doing,
reject the bid for the Wenzel the Wenzel Plaza restrooms and direct staff to evaluate other potential alternatives both on and off site, especially with the Blodgett House owner, and develop a committee which will consist of the chair of the Finance, Budget, Personnel Committee, the chair of the Board of Public Works, Mr. Barg, Mr. Casperson, Mrs. Gomez, Mr. Turchi, a citizen community member at large, Mrs. Zielinski, and Ms. Anderson.
Are you agreeable to that, Alderman Varsho, as your motion? Alderman Speros, second? Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
No.
Mr. Rigel?
No.
Mayor?
That motion passes.
Now you can move on.
Okay. Item AA, request by Councilmember Tompkins to discuss policy for allowing public comments at council meetings, presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. At the last meeting, the council member from District 3, Natasha Tompkins, brought up the idea of having a policy for public comments. The Economic Development Board, many of you may know, did adopt a policy this spring to kind of put some parameters around the public comment period at the beginning of their meetings. You have in your packet that policy, which has 6 bullet points. I will read them and so that you can hear them out loud as well, people in the audience and in the public. The EDB has determined that it is desirable to allow public comments near the start of each regular board meeting, provided that the following limitations are established and enforced. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes. The chairperson will cut off the speaker after that time. Number 2, Comments must be related to the area of economic development and/or the mission of the EDB. Number 3, comments must be made in appropriate, respectful manner. Profanity will not be permitted. Number 4, comments must not be personal attacks, regardless of whether the target is present in the room. Number 5, the purpose is one-way communication, no interaction between speakers and board members. And number 6, comments will be taken under advisement. No action will be taken at the meeting in question. Now, obviously, if the council is interested in adopting a policy of this nature, a couple of these are not directly relevant. The references to economic development being the focus of the comments, or I think there's one other one that seemed really specific toward the EDB and their operation, but the heart of it is what you see in terms of the length of time, the nature of the remarks, and those types of things, and whether or not this body would like to adopt a similar policy to what the Economic Development Board put in place back in the spring.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Giles. Do we have a second to that motion?
Can I ask what the motion is, please?
The motion would be for the city council to adopt the policy that the Economic Development Board was using, minus the second bullet point.
Alderman Raggles seconds the motion. Alderman Varsho?
Is this not what we do currently?
We don't really have a specific policy currently for public comment. The mayor has genuinely or recently been, holding to the 5 minutes. Yeah. But I don't think there's anything in code or policy at this moment that addresses that.
We found it's all been guidelines. There's no policy adopted at all.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do understand the time we live in right now, but the comments have always been limited to 5 minutes. Appropriate and respectful manner. These are citizens that aren't happy. They're not going to be too respectful. They're going to come in here and they're going to be angry and they're going to yell. And we don't respond back and forth. Number 4, no interaction back and forth with them. And if we want to take action, we can bring it up at future agenda items at the bottom of the agenda that we have. You're telling citizens to come here and be respectful manner. What for? They're mad. They're upset at a reason. Why should they come in here and be, obviously they're going to try to be respectful, but they're going to be upset. That's why they come in here and talk. We have thick skin. We're sitting up here. If you don't have thick skin for sitting up here, you shouldn't be sitting up here. So I really don't think that we need to have we don't need to follow this. I really don't. I think what we do currently is sufficient enough. I do not want to hold the citizens to coming in here, and I understand we don't want to be profanity. We don't want them to come in here and yell at us, but they're going to. They're upset. That's the reason they come in here. I don't want to turn this into, I have feelings and you hurt my feelings and now I'm going to go home and my feelings are hurt. I really would rather just leave it the way it is currently.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, I wanted to just address a couple of things. I agree with a lot of points that Mr. Varsho made, but I just want to start at the top. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes. If we adopt something like this, I think there should be an exception because sometimes somebody's comments go to 6 minutes and we really desperately need to hear what they're saying. So I think that there should be some gray area there given to the discretion of the mayor or whoever's running the meeting. I'm not talking about letting go to 15 minutes, but, sometimes citizens are talking about a later agenda item and they're really supplying the council with a lot of good information. So I think that there should be a little gray area there. Obviously, number 2, it shouldn't be restricted to economic development because this isn't the Economic Development Board. We would like for people to use appropriate language with no profanity. Respectful manner is a judgment call. So I don't know how you enforce a judgment call. I mean, what you may see respectful, I may not, or vice versa. So that's pretty vague. Is there a problem at all with the thought that we're restricting free speech? Because to me, that's what it seems like, and I don't know how you can do that. So that would be my main concern, is this seems like an attack on freedom of speech, which I don't think we are allowed to do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I admit that I haven't reviewed this. I only review those things that are kind of submitted to me specifically for review. I have a concern with respect to comments must be made in an appropriate and respectful manner. That's very vague. We are talking about, so keep in mind, there are very limited public forums, but this is one, all right? I mean, this is a true public forum. The public are coming in here specifically to present their opinions and positions. And so if we restrict that in a way that's vague, that's a problem constitutionally. So I do have a concern about a reference that comments must be made in an appropriate, respectful manner being vague. Profanity, we've governed that through disorderly conduct statutes. I think you could prohibit profanity. So I would recommend that you not approve something that would be limiting to an appropriate and respectful manner, mainly because it's so vague that someone would not know exactly what that means, and they could claim that having a rule that says that my being able to come and speak in a public forum is limited to your determination of what's an appropriate manner. That's just constitutionally restrictive. The second one is comments must not be personal attacks regardless of whether the target is present in the room. Personal attacks, again, is vague. The idea that somebody comes in and complains about a member of staff or a member of the council or myself, those would be deemed personal attacks. But the question is, if the public has an open forum to come in and say, I don't like what you did and I think you have a bias, I don't like what you did and I think you're not doing your job properly, those are personal attacks. To say you can't say that in a public forum would again be an inappropriate regulation of speech in a public forum. So I recommend against that provision altogether. The others are appropriate and certainly rules, frankly, that we've applied. But on those two, I certainly would suggest to you that you not have a restriction on an appropriate, respectful manner and a restriction that would say no personal attacks. I understand what you want to do, but we've discussed this before in other situations. One of those was a couple of years back, we looked at regulations that had to do with an ethics consideration. It went back all the way back to the ethics board, and I said, you have to be careful what you're doing when you start regulating the way that people can treat one another in this body, because this too is a government body that is an open forum. So that we have to be nice with one another may not be readily regulated, and so that's a problem. Most bodies don't have that. So.
Can I have a follow-up to ask him?
Yes.
So the mayor, or whoever's running the meeting, I don't know why she still has the ability to point of order a meeting, even during public comments. So if somebody was up there just laying out a slur of bad words, she can still gavel that and call a point of order. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, so there is certainly case law that supports that somebody could be removed from the meeting if they're disruptive, right? And that can be even a member of this body. We haven't gotten there, and it would take something extreme, but you can have a disorderly conduct charge for somebody's behavior in this council room, whether it be a citizen or a member of the body. So that would be appropriate. However, anytime that you're talking about the content of speech, that becomes problematic. And the one exception to that is something that would create, some type of public emergency. The best example dealt with constitutionally is you can't run in here and say, fire, or raise up your hands, put your hands up. I mean, something like that. Okay, that's free speech, except that it's creating a disturbance, and so it's illegal. But other than that, it's very dangerous to start talking about the content of speech. That isn't appropriate. And you have, again, I can't emphasize it enough. This is a true public forum. We talk about this in other areas, such as our Facebook pages and stuff, and we try to restrict them sometimes from being public forums, but there isn't any doubt coming into this council forum, room, and we allow public speech. Once we do that, that is a public forum, and to restrict the content of that speech would be inappropriate.
Excuse me, with the second being removed, can we even be discussing this any longer?
That's actually, there's an amendment request, so the mayor will.
Alderman Giles?
So would it be appropriate to make an amendment removing comments 3 and 4, but changing to no direct threats?
So I don't, you're probably closer to okay, but what does it mean to have a direct threat? Does that mean a direct physical threat or direct threat that I'm going to make sure that you lose your job, Mr. Barr? Okay, so what does that mean? And then you start to get to that restriction. Probably you're okay until you make the decision you're gonna cut somebody off, but you have created a public forum, and when somebody looks at this and says, well, I would have come to the council room and I would have come to council and I would have spoke about Mr. Barr's behavior, but it said I couldn't directly threaten him. And that was vague. That's a vague restriction, restricting my ability to engage in free speech. You are opening yourself up to this claim that somebody says that policy, which controlled whether I could come and speak, was so vague that it unfairly restricted my constitutional right to speak. So I would be careful fashioning that. If this is something where you truly want to deal with this kind of issue, then I think we need to be very careful about that language and look at what's appropriate. So.
Okay, so Mr. Giles, would you like to, how would you like to amend the motion?
I'll pull my motion.
Okay. Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't like this when I saw that it went into the EDB. I've had some discussions. As much as we all want everyone to be respectful, most of the stuff that you hear in this chamber is somewhat emotion-based, from people that are excited about something, people that are upset about something. But ultimately, in the end, we have the right to freedom of speech and we have the right to redress our government. And this is the forum where that takes place. And I can't support, personally, I can't support anything. We usually have law enforcement at these meetings, which I noticed there isn't tonight. But if there does get to a point of where you would consider it disorderly conduct or something, I honestly can't think of the last time we didn't have law enforcement here. I cannot support restricting free speech in any level other than when it reaches a violation like that. So I will not support it.
Alderman Wagner and then Alderman Tompkins.
Point of order, there's no motion on the floor at this point.
The motion just came up, but we're in discussion. So I'm going to call on these two because Alderman Wagner was here before.
He withdrew it. He withdrew it. Mr. Giles withdrew the motion.
You withdrew the amendment. We still have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Did he never thought, I thought he withdrew the motion, didn't he?
He had an amendment he was making. He withdrew his amendment.
I can't either. I can't.
Unless you're withdrawing the motion.
That's okay.
I will withdraw the motion, the original motion as well.
So.
And Alderman Murman, you're okay with him? Okay. Okay. Alderman Wagner is up next.
Thank you. I don't know, I think maybe what's going on here?
Without a motion, I don't think we can discuss it, correct?
This is discretion of the council.
Okay.
A motion is not required for discussion on this item.
Thank you. Absolutely, sir. I think Mr. Fire might be one of the few people that know that or saw this or knew it, but they have the same public comments period at a board meeting of the county board as they do, as the same thing we do here. The difference is they've got this funny little paragraph down in very tiny print down below the public comments that says that the public is here invited to bring their claims, grievances, and remonstrances. Believe me, I had never heard that word before in my life before I got on the county board. But I pulled it up here. A remonstrance is a forcibly reproachful protest. In other words, we know they're going to yell at us. We know. I wish I could have been down there during the manure hauling days. Mike was. So you talk about a rough crowd. That was a rough crowd all the way around the thing. So the point that's trying to, but this reinforces the point that we've been trying to make is that if they are angry, if they are royally hacked off at us, they're going to come here and they're going to tell us. Mm-hmm. And it's their right to do so. And the final part of that is we signed up for this job. We actually spent money to get here. That's unbelievable. But anyway, so I don't think we should try and do anything to slow it down or stop it. If you want to use the term remonstratives in there again, go ahead. I think it'll be fun just trying to watch everybody figure it out. Anyway, that's all I have to add to this.
Alderman O'Reilly? Okay. Alderman Fire?
I'd like to make one comment. The county has a control on this. You get 3 minutes. And then you say if somebody wants to talk longer. One time we had a judge get up and wanted to explain something. And when he got the 3 minutes, Lance says, Your Honor, you're done. And he shut him off. Yeah. So they have 3 minutes. You take 2 minutes away to the 5, and it's going to make this move a lot faster. And the county does it all the time. No matter who you are, what you are, 3 minutes, you're done.
Oh. Alderman Weigel?
I don't have anything.
Okay, let me.
The red light was on. Okay.
Let me say one more thing.
Yes.
The one thing I will say, the irony of this is that if you open this up for a public forum, you cannot restrict it based on that content, so that's problematic. But you are not required to allow public comment. That's a choice that you make. So if there was a concern, you have the ability to just completely cut that off. But once you open it up to a public comment, that is a public forum.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, I would never be supportive of removing public comments from our meetings. You signed up for this. Listen, I've been treated poorly sitting up here. I've had public comments directed at me. And so I understand how that feels. It's not great, but I don't feel like we can take public comments away from people. I think this is where they come. This is where they reach out to their alder, their mayor, their city staff. And I would hesitate removing public comments at all. And perhaps we shouldn't do a policy. We should just, have a guideline that says, comments will be limited to 5 minutes or per the discretion of the person running the meeting. And that they should be, that the purpose is of it to be one-way communication, which is what we do now. Mm-hmm. The fifth bullet here too doesn't make sense to me. Comments will be taken under advisement. No action will be taken at the meeting in question. That obviously does not happen all the time because a lot of times people do come to speak about things that are on the agenda and they're on there for a vote, or an action item. So I don't even think that's doesn't make sense whatsoever, but I would be very opposed to removing public comments completely.
Alderman Tompkins?
I agree that public comments are important and vital to our position. The reason I brought this up was that it did seem like a good addition to the EDB meeting. I do wonder if maybe we should limit to 3 minutes because sometimes we do have, 45 minutes, an hour of public comments. Maybe that would help speed up things, but, either way. I do have, and I appreciate this conversation and this discussion. I appreciate Hap's point of view about, the very legalities. I have a question about point of order. If are council members allowed to do a point of order during public comments, or are we to remain absolutely silent?
No. Oh.
I I couldn't hear that answer.
I'll say it this way. You could do a point of order if there's a point of order, but when someone's just up speaking, it would be very hard to come up with a point of order, which is that the order or the procedure that's being used is improper. So if a member of the public is up and they're speaking and they're giving their opinion, it's hard for me to imagine a procedural problem with them doing that. So that would be an issue.
I'm just thinking about the other day when the mayor rightfully gavelled someone because two people in the audience started talking to each other. Would that be a situation where if there was no gavel, we could, as council members, just do a point of order to restore order to the meeting?
You could draw that situation to the attention of the chair, who is the one that should be controlling the order when you're talking about something being disruptive. That would be appropriate, and it could be point of order, this is being disrupted, but it would be up to the chair to control that.
Okay. And then the last reason that I thought it'd be good to look at, but maybe it is a moot point, is it did seem of late that we had people coming up and doing personal attacks on staff that, or even council members that weren't true. And of course, there's no way for rebuttal, but maybe that's just the nature of the job that no matter what people say about our staff or what they say about us, whether it's true or not, that it's just a one-sided statement.
Mayor. Correct. Yep, exactly. Yes, sir. The one thing to consider about that, and we always have, and this has been something implemented, many years before your time, but during my time, and that is the idea that we have at the end of the meeting an opportunity to set an agenda for the next time. So if that was to happen, and you were, for example, hypothetically attacked during that, and you missed your opportunity to speak, you could ask then at that time, at the end of the meeting, for next meeting to put that on the agenda. You could literally say, I would like you to put on the agenda for the next meeting an opportunity for me to address the public comments from this week. And that would be your opportunity to do that. Why? Because we've now agendized that, and all public are on notice that that's what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Alderman Stalbert?
considering the order of the agenda, public comments come before council comments, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So could an alderperson review comments made during public comment at that time?
No, because that's a one-sided. No, I mean, at that point, you're making comments in your official capacity, and the public's not on notice. So if it's some kind of accusation, or your spending was wrong, or whatever it might be, or you were wrong with what you said last week, and you do that, the general public misses the opportunity to be there and join in that and hear it and or comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, maybe I'll wrap this up as the person who wrote this, what you have in front of you, you've been discussing for the last few minutes. And I wrote it at the request of the EDB. I totally get the concern, the freedom of speech and all those kind of things. My intent in writing it at the request of the EDB was just to say, these are the kind of things we're looking for. Not that you're gonna be thrown out of Marshfield if you don't comply. And I think, if someone walks to the podium tonight at public comment and says, Steve Barg's a lousy city administrator, I would never point to this and say he needs to be booted. These are, I think the threshold I was thinking of when I wrote this was much higher than that. It was the ranting and raving and swearing and so forth that I don't think this body should have to listen to. And maybe people in this room, based on the comments made today, think that we should have to listen to swearing and ranting and raving at elevated voices but that was the level I was thinking of. So just to clarify, I was never thinking of the fact that somebody says something negative about this body or about individuals up here was going to trigger this. But I'm fine with where this is going. I just wanted to clarify the genesis for it.
Alderman Stalbert?
Closing comment. I think the intent is good that we have a policy in place. I see both sides of the spectrum. Some of the most interesting thoughts that stayed with me were public comments that were at random, that were not to any agenda item. And I really appreciate the public comments. I think the time limit of 5 minutes began during the hotel conference center, because then we did have repeated long theatric comments being made, and it really hampered good government. And I think that we need a policy to help us balance that. In other words, we need to do our job effectively, but we also need to be open to public comment. So I would be in favor of a policy to help us set those basic parameters without encroaching on public rights. the motion light went away, but I would make a motion to that effect if the body were in. In other words, send it back to legal for review, which I think we maybe should have done before we got in this discussion. You didn't see it until tonight, apparently. My motion is to send it to legal counsel for review and recommendation. No?
Go ahead, Ann. I mean, assuming you got a motion, assuming you got a motion, I'm not opposed to you making a motion. Here's the problem, though. You're asking me to look at this for recommendation, and then I'm imposing my thoughts in regard to what you want to do and what those controls are. And, you know, I think the one thing I have offered up to you always is, that's not my realm.
Okay.
I may have all kinds of opinions about that, one way or the other. That is, I lose my opinion when I sit in this chair. So if you've got something you want there, then that's got to come from some direction as to what you want in that thing.
Okay, so I would.
So if it's minutes or time on it, that's, you present that. If it's that you want to, you know, prohibit profanity, or you want, those things need to be thrown out. I can look at them legally, but I don't want it on me to try to come up with them because it's not appropriate.
Fair enough. So I will restate my motion then, if it's appropriate, that it be reviewed by staff, city administrator, Jessica, with legal review and brought back to this body for consideration as a policy.
Alderman Werman, are you seconding that?
Good to remove the second. Because you said you're pulling back motion.
If I just restated it,
got it.
That's appropriate.
Okay. I'll keep the second then, because I assume if there's a motion on the floor, you need to have a second in order to discuss.
Correct.
Okay. Do I have the floor then?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. I was just going to kind of piggyback off something Rebecca said, and I think it kind of ties into what Russ was saying, is it sounds like we don't want to be restrictive with this. I don't necessarily think that some form of documentation is bad. Would it be legally acceptable to provide maybe a blurb on the sign-up sheet as like this is your opportunity to speak freely. We ask that you try to be respectful, or something to that. I mean, it doesn't, you know, suggest any punishment or say you can't do this, but it also asks you to be respectful at the same time. Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Absolutely.
I think it's there in the moment, it's visible to the public, and it also doesn't say you're going to get punished for speaking freely, but it's asking you to please be considerate when you're here. So.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's appropriate and a good idea. I actually chimed in. I was trying to figure out what the motion was. If you could please repeat that.
The current motion is to direct staff to write a policy for public comment with review by legal and bring it back to the council for review.
So we have a motion by Alderman Stauber, second by Alderman Werman. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Item BB, request by Councilmember Giles to allow city land located between Butternut Parkway and Pecan Parkway to be used for pollination purposes, presented by Steve Bark, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been discussion about the importance of pollinator habitat. In fact, this body adopted Resolution 2024-11 earlier this year, actually stating that and recognizing the importance of public-private partnerships to build the pollinator population within the city of Marshfield. So there's been discussion about would there be an appropriate location to sort of promote that. And in working with staff recently and working with Councilmember Giles, it's determined that the city-owned property south of East 17th Street between Butternut and Parkway and Pecan Parkway would be an excellent location. One issue that might have to be addressed if we want to go that direction is Section 11.06 of the municipal code does refer to milkweed as a noxious weed subject to removal. So that issue may need to be revisited by the Board of Public Works as part of the process, but that could be addressed with an ordinance amendment if deemed appropriate. So the Marshfield Monarchs are very interested in this prospect, and I believe that Councilmember Giles is going to read a short letter that they submitted for tonight's meeting.
A brief, short letter. I know that Melissa is actually at the public library right now giving a educational speech. So I'm just reading this short response that she sent. And it just says, on behalf of Marshfield Monarchs, we would love the opportunity to help turn this piece of land into a thriving pollinator habitat. It not only gets the right amount of both sun and shade, but is also land that is easily accessible and has great potential for us to plant native plants. Over the years, we've seen a steady decline of habitats or areas we've collected milkweed from get wiped out due to construction. In the last 7 years, a dozen or so places we've relied on to collect milkweed from to feed our caterpillars has dropped down to 3. It's just an eye-opener to what our pollinators must see as well. A place they once relied on now is gone. We need to start replacing what we take. The area that is being spoken of is already a beautiful habitat for birds and small creatures. We'd simply add to it a collection of native milkweed and other native nectaring flowers and plants. Thank you so much for considering this possible opportunity. We are looking forward to hopefully call this piece of land home to all pollinators.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Wagner. Any other discussion?
Excuse me? I move to approve. This piece of land cannot be developed. There's a stream that runs through it. I say let them plant a little bit of milkweed, let some monarchs go, let them pollinate. I'm good with this.
Okay, Alderman O'Reilly, Alderman Starber, and then Alderman Weigel. Alderman O'Reilly, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I support this idea too. I do have some questions on how we would handle that with the milkweed. And I'm not sure, I don't know my plants well enough to be able to determine why that was considered not to be allowed, but I guess the only concern I would have is what it would do to neighbors if this is something that is going to spread into other, I don't know how to handle that, and I don't even know if that's a realistic concern, but I would just stress to look at that, because other than that, I think it's a great idea.
Alderman Stauber.
I second, I guess, the concern about neighbors. And my question for maybe the Director of Public Works is, who currently maintains the green space, and how might that change if it's planted for pollinators?
As you may recall, just recently, I think Parks and Rec and Forestry had equipment down there and cleared out buckthorn and a lot of other species in that area and kind of cleaned up some of that. It's basically on an as-needed basis. I don't know who created the original weed ordinance. It's been around for a while, so yeah, getting that adjusted, I don't think will be too big of an issue. I've talked to Mr. Giles about this, and I think it should be something that's easy to do. I don't have any issues with this. I think it's a good idea also. I think anytime you use public space, and it's greenway right now, and it's the area that does flood on occasion or sees a lot of water, I think it's a perfect place for this.
So, just so I'm clear, there's no lawn involved that residents are maintaining? It's just wild?
There are some people to the south, I think, that mow across the street from their homes. As you approach Washington, you'll see some people that actually planted their own trees in the city property across the street. That area that you've identified is mowed with city mowers and stuff, so we may have to find some areas in there that are just, we leave more natural too.
Yeah, I'll just add, like I said in my comments earlier, that if there's a desire by the body to move forward with this idea, I think it's a good idea, that we send it to the Board of Public Works to review the noxious weed ordinance and why milkweed is on there, if there's that concern to area residents as a result of removing that from that list before we would go out and do it. But aside from that, I mean, bringing it through the ordinance amendment process, just checking to see if the body is favorable toward this idea.
We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Wagner. Alderman Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. You stole my thunder. Because I was going to bring on the same thing. I think we're learning a lot about amendments here tonight, which is super fun.
No, it isn't.
Would it be appropriate to make an amendment to send this to, I'm linking right now. Do you see that? Not the Plan Commission, is that right?
No.
I think the Board of Public Works is probably more appropriate in this case, given where it's located in the municipal code.
So with that, okay, so then I'll make that motion to amend, to send this over to the Board of Public Works to address the classification as a noxious weed and then investigate this further.
Mike, would you push his amend button?
No, yeah.
Alderman Rice, thank you.
Yeah.
And do we have a second to that amendment? Yes, by Alderman Stauber. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote on the amendment.
Don't beat over.
You know, and.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Now do we go back to the original motion? The original motion? And we have a motion by Alderman Rigel.
No.
Oh, sorry, a motion by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Wagner. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item CC, discuss process for addressing 2025 budget, city budget request from economic development partner organizations presented by Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, for the last several years, our partner organizations in economic development, for whom we're very grateful for all that they do, Mackey, Main Street, Visit Marshfield, and actually our own Parks and Recreation Department's been part of this in recent years with respect to Wenzel Family Plaza. They would present their budget request to the Economic Development Board, and the EDB would determine if they're favorable, and then they would incorporate them into the budget request that goes forward to the council, the overall budget that you see in the fall. In fact, that meeting would, if the EDB were still around, that meeting would be held on this Thursday, that those organizations would be presenting in this room. The EDB is no more based on the action you took at the last meeting. So the discussion here, I think, is looking for your direction on how and when you want to see and hear those presentations and how you want to consider their requests. I mean, on one hand, you could wait till the fall when other requests are being considered. On the other hand, I think these organizations would like direction in terms of what you're thinking as they begin preparing their overall budgets for 2025 for their own organizations. Is the city favorable and to what degree? So, you know, I guess they present written materials that I can submit to you, but they also have historically made in-person presentations on behalf of the requests and really detailing how the monies would be used. So I look for your direction on how you would like to entertain those as part of the 2025 budget process.
We have a motion by Alderman Varsho. We have a second on that motion.
My motion would be to have the groups come and present their budgets to the next finance, budget, and personnel meeting next Tuesday. Since they were going to come and present it to EDB this Thursday, they could do it next Tuesday to finance, budget, and personnel, could they not?
Would you be ready? I guess
I mean, right, you said it would have been.
Well, I mean, I said, yeah, but when the EDB was dissolved back on the 25th of June, it kind of threw things out a little bit. So I really haven't talked to them lately.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But,
I just assumed.
No, that was a good assumption on your part.
Okay.
Would you be favorable to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting the first one in August? Would that be acceptable?
Sure, that works for me.
Do that?
I'll move to have them
Yes.
present their budgets to the,
that'd be,
on the first meeting in August?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion by Alderman Varsho, a second by Alderman Rigel. Alderman Spiros?
Just a question for clarification. So they would be presenting their budgets and then we would be when would we be voting on that? Because my concern again is that we're voting on little bits and pieces, just like my concern with the CIP. You know, we approve the CIP, but we don't really know what the full budget is, nor are we going to know our budget until October. So it feels like the same situation. If we're going to be voting to approve funding them, we don't know what our budget is yet.
Well,
so
no, that's a really good point. Let's do this. Normally, you would get their request as part of the overall EDB budget that's presented to you. What if we plan that by the time that their request goes through Finance, Budget, and Personnel, then we get to the council in the middle of August, that perhaps the entire proposed economic development budget as a whole comes from me to you. It will include other things, including facade grant allocations and other things. So you look at that total budget and can give a route, because that's from the 205 fund. We know how much money we're going to get roughly from utilities, that you could consider that part, enough to give them direction as to whether or not their requests are likely to be honored.
Yeah.
Reasonable?
Any other questions, comments? Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. Have their budgets always come from the 205 fund?
For some time now, yeah. I mean, the dividend has typically been $250,000 to $300,000, and the requests from those organizations have generally made up maybe upwards of a third to a half of those monies, and that's been the allocation that's come back to them, is through the approval by the council of that EDB request from the 205 fund specifically, correct?
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item DD, suggested items for future agendas. Alderman Werman.
Thank you. This is kind of piggybacking off our discussion on the covenants earlier. I was wondering, would it be possible for staff to put together some open real estate that we have within the city that maybe we've had business holdups and why? Because I know Rebecca has kind of mentioned like those are really, really strict covenants. And so I'm really curious to see if we've had potential for businesses to come in. For example, we've got that brand new building with the Jimmy John's in it. I mean, I don't know, has anybody pursued that? Has it been held up for any reason? Stuff like that. Like, I would love to know if there's a reason that businesses are not coming here and how we could review some of that. But it's hard to know that unless you're kind of on the inside. So if we could find some way to pull that report, doesn't have to be for the next council meeting, but I think we should start looking at those things because that's something we've just recently talked about, is figuring out what our priorities are, and we need to start evaluating why businesses aren't coming here. So,
Alderman Spiros?
Yes, I would like to add a discussion item to the July 23rd, 5 p.m. special meeting. I would like to add a discussion on sending the idea of a new police station to referendum.
Ooh, okay.
Just a discussion. I'm not saying I want.
No, that's great. That's great. Absolutely. Exhaust all the possibilities. Any other items? Seeing none, item EE. Adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute, Chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Marshfield Utilities wholesale power contract and closed session under Wisconsin Statute, Chapter 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Pay rate changes for certain non-represented staff related to new wage scale. We have a motion by Alderman Giles, second by Alderman Werman. All those in favor to adjourn, please vote.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rigel?
Yes.
10-minute
Fire?
recess.